Hello everyone, and welcome back to Paranormal M. I'm happy you're here. Some people have messaged me saying these stories actually help them fall asleep, so if that happens for you too, feel free to share the channel with a friend who has trouble sleeping. And please subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like these. Tonight's first story is about someone who moved in with their grandparents and started experiencing footsteps, knocking, and other strange things in the house during the night. Get settled in, and I hope you have a peaceful night and sleep really well. I was in that strange, in-between season of life. Not quite a kid anymore, and not fully sure who I was becoming. So I moved in with my grandparents out in the country. Their place had this huge backyard, a swimming pool, and power lines not too far off. People who study hauntings always seem to care about details like that, so I remember them clearly. What I want you to understand is that living with something haunting a house is nothing like those ghost shows people love to watch. It is not exciting. It is not fun. You do not get to pack up your gear and leave when it gets too intense. You are already home. You are trying to sleep or make coffee or just get through another ordinary day, and then something happens that should not happen, and you are left sitting there trying to make sense of it. Most of it happened when everyone else was asleep, which somehow made it lonelier. I was always a night owl, and after a while I noticed that almost every night, right around 2:20 in the morning, I would hear footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Not random creaks, not the house settling. Real, measured footsteps, like someone pacing slowly back and forth on the carpet. Then came the knocking. First on my bedroom door, then along the wall by the closets, as if whatever it was wanted me to know exactly where it was. It would go on for more than an hour sometimes, and that was the part that got to me. It did not feel accidental. It felt deliberate. My family mostly explained everything away. They always had some reason. A noise was old pipes. A sound was the house shifting. A feeling was nerves. And I get it, honestly. People want the world to stay sensible. But when you are the one lying there in the dark, hearing footsteps stop outside your door night after night, sensible starts to feel very far away. It was not just the footsteps either. My grandmother had these framed photos hanging in the hallway, pictures of her children. They started falling off the wall over and over again. Usually it was the photo of my mother when she was about my age, and she looked so much like me then that it was unsettling even before everything else. At first the family blamed vibrations from trucks on the road. Then the frames started ending up thrown across the hallway. One hit hard enough to crack. Eventually one was hurled at my grandfather and cut his arm badly enough that my grandmother took every single picture down and put them away in the basement. After that, the hallway walls stayed bare. My sister came over one night when we were talking seriously about moving out together. She believed me more than most people did, because she had seen unexplainable things before too. That night though, it was like the house decided to make its point. A door slammed in her face. Then the kitchen light switched off while the rest of the house still had power. Then we sat in the spare room and watched a computer chair begin to turn on its own. Slowly, smoothly, a full circle, then more, until it finally stopped facing straight toward us. She left right after that. I could not even blame her. Still, I remember feeling abandoned in a way that was hard to admit. For one night, I had hoped I would not be the only one carrying it. There were nights I woke up with the unmistakable feeling that something was standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me. You know that feeling when you can just tell you are being watched? It was that, except heavier, meaner. I would keep my eyes closed and pretend to be asleep because I truly did not know what I would do if I looked and saw someone there. Other things made no sense at all. The old thermostat would somehow trigger both the heat and the air conditioning, which should not have been possible. The vents would thunder with these violent banging sounds, like someone hitting metal with a bat. My things would disappear and then turn up later on the laundry table downstairs. Shoes, medication, a camera once. I started joking with the air out of pure exhaustion, telling whatever was there that if it borrowed my stuff, it could at least leave me something useful in return. Gallows humor, I guess. Humans do love decorating terror with sarcasm. Then I found EVP recordings, and that changed everything. I started leaving a recorder running during the quiet hours when I knew no one else would be home. At first it was awkward, honestly. Talking into an empty room, asking questions you are not sure anyone can hear. But over time, voices started appearing in the recordings. Some were kind, surprisingly kind. If I sneezed, one would bless me. If I set down a cup of coffee before a session, I would sometimes capture what sounded like a polite thank you. That became my little ritual. I figured if I was asking unseen people to speak to me, the least I could do was offer some hospitality. Strange as that sounds, it seemed to matter. And yet, even with those gentle voices, the frightening activity never fully stopped. It was like there were different presences there. Some seemed warm, curious, maybe even protective. Others were not. One night, when the house was especially violent again with the banging and the mechanical chaos, I forced myself to record. Later, listening back through headphones, I heard the most chilling voice I had ever captured. It was mocking, intimate. It said something about whispering in my ear. That was the moment I stopped thinking I was just dealing with random energy or misunderstood spirits. That felt malevolent, intentional, like it wanted me afraid. By then, this had been going on for years. So one Sunday morning, after another session full of the kinder voices, I asked them for help. I remember feeling almost foolish, but also desperate. I told them there was something in that house terrorizing me, and if they could do anything, please do. After that, the worst activity stopped. Not forever, but long enough to feel like relief. And when it came back months later, I asked again, and again it stopped. Eventually it seemed to give up. Not long after, I left for college in another city. I finally got out of that house. But I still think about those years sometimes, because as frightening as they were also one of the only periods in my life when something impossible seemed to answer back. I did not get every explanation. I still do not know exactly what was there, or why some of it felt caring while one part felt cruel. But I know what I lived through. And for the first time in that house, I also know I was not entirely alone. I need to tell you something that's been weighing on me for a long time, and I still don't fully know what to make of it. A few years back, my family bought a rental property. At the rear of the lot, there was a small house where the previous owner, a man named Wayne, had been living before he passed away suddenly at 64. His relatives sold us the whole property not long after, and when we got it, almost all of his belongings were still there, like he had just stepped out and never come back. So, little by little, we started going through everything. We kept some things, planned to donate or sell others, and tried to make sense of this whole life that had been left behind. Wayne had this incredible collection of vintage stuff. His kitchen looked like something out of an old diner, with a booth instead of a regular table, retro wall signs, old music machines, and all kinds of carefully matched decor. It was charming, honestly. But mixed in with all that were a few things that felt off. The strangest one was this clock that ran backward. About a year after we bought the place, we found someone willing to move into the house as it was and help us clear out and sell what was left. But only a few months after moving in, he also died unexpectedly in that same house. After that, no one else ever moved in. We just kept clearing it out ourselves, slowly carrying more and more of Wayne's things back to my parents' house. I lived about half an hour away at the time, so I'd come by now and then to visit or house sit. And not long after my parents started bringing more of those things into their home, I started feeling uneasy there. I kept trying to brush it off, telling myself I was being dramatic, but the feeling never really left. It was like the air in the house had changed. By then, the rental house had been sitting empty for about a year, and that's when everything seemed to get worse. My mom had 2 pet birds and a cat. The birds were young and healthy, but they both died suddenly within days of each other. Then, not long after that, our cat passed too. He was older, sure, but it still felt abrupt. And then, only a few weeks later, my mom died unexpectedly in our family home, not in the rental house, but in our own home. That alone would have been enough to shake anyone. But there was more. My mom ran a business out of the house, and one of her employees worked with her there regularly. About a week after my mom passed, that employee also died unexpectedly in her sleep. Then after my mom's funeral, we started finding dead opossums in the backyard, several of them. At that point, it stopped feeling like a string of unrelated tragedies and started feeling like something darker was attached to us. My dad and I couldn't help connecting the dots. We started wondering if there was something angry, something heavy, something not at peace tied to that other house, or maybe to the things we had taken from it. Eventually, my dad got rid of most of what he had brought home, and over time, that awful feeling in my parents' house seemed to ease up. But here's the part that still has me on edge. Over the years, I kept a few of Wayne's things for myself. Nothing especially dramatic, or so I thought. Just an old pair of work boots, a couple of worn work shirts, one faded band tee, and some old beanbag chairs. Small things, harmless things. At least that's what I told myself. But about 6 months ago, that same feeling I used to get at my parents' house started showing up in my apartment. But now the feeling is back, and it's stronger than before. The only real change I can point to is that I recently added Wayne's old work boots to my regular shoe collection instead of keeping them tucked away. That might sound small, and maybe it is, but it's the one thing that shifted before everything started feeling worse again. Other than that, nothing changed. The rest of his things have been with me for years. I even looked into the history of the building, hoping maybe there'd be something there that could explain any of this, but I found almost nothing. I know the house itself was built sometime in the 1970s, and beyond that, I've hit a wall. So that's where I am now. I'm trying to understand what I'm dealing with, whether this is grief, coincidence, something spiritual, or something attached to the things we brought home. More than anything, I want to know how to make it stop for good. Because whatever this is, it doesn't feel finished. And I can't shake the feeling that somehow it followed us. So I need to tell you about what's been happening, because honestly, I'm exhausted and a little shaken. My partner Adrian moved into this old apartment building a little over a year ago. Pretty early on, people told us the place had a reputation. They said it was haunted, but in that casual way people say things when they don't have to be the ones sleeping there. Supposedly the spirit was harmless, maybe even the former property owner, just lingering around out of curiosity. At first, I tried to take that in stride. In the beginning, it was subtle. You know that awful feeling when you can tell you're not alone, even when the room is empty? It was like that. We'd catch little movements out of the corner of our eyes. My dog would suddenly start barking into blank space like someone was standing right there. I'd tell myself it was just nerves, just an old building settling, just my imagination filling in the blanks. But then it stopped feeling explainable. We started hearing loud knocks and bangs with no clear source. Lamps would flick on by themselves. A picture frame slid off the wall for no reason. Small things would disappear and turn up in strange places. And then one night, I saw something I still can't fully process. Not a vague shape, not a trick of the light. A full figure. Dark, human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Just a solid shadow standing where no one should have been. I've never seen anything like that before. A couple of weeks ago, I even felt something touch me. It startled me so badly that I just said out loud, "Please don't do that. I mean it." I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I just set a boundary, I guess, which is a strange thing to have to do with something you can't even prove is there. What makes this harder is that both Adrian and I have always been a little sensitive to this kind of thing. We used to stay with his grandmother, and her house had its own energy too. But that never felt threatening. Strange, yes. Heavy sometimes. But not cruel, not invasive. This place feels different. At one point, a friend of mine came by. She's also sensitive, and the second she stepped inside, she got quiet. Later, she said, "There are several of them here. They like staying out of sight." Then she refused to explain what she meant. So that was comforting in the least helpful way possible. Eventually, we talked more with Adrian's roommate, and that opened a whole other door I really wish had stayed shut. He collects haunted objects. Not one or two odd antiques. I mean a whole collection. Items with stories attached to them, things people believed carried spirits or energy. Suddenly, a lot of the tension in that apartment started making more sense. His roommate also has intense mood swings, and at first I figured that was tied to his mental health and drinking. But lately, Adrian has started changing too, especially after the roommate has been gone for a few days. That's what scares me. It feels like whatever is in that apartment doesn't just stay in the background. It presses on people. It lingers. It affects the whole atmosphere until you can hardly breathe in there. And tonight was the moment where it all really tipped over for me. Adrian had been home alone all day, sick with a bad cold, totally congested, barely able to smell anything. When his roommate got home, he immediately asked if Adrian had left the gas stove on. Adrian told him no, because he hadn't touched it once. Not all day. And this is not the first time this has happened. That's the part I can't shake. Because spooky noises are one thing, lights flickering are one thing. But this felt dangerous. Real world dangerous. The kind of thing that makes you stop treating it like a creepy story and start asking whether someone is actually safe in that space. So now I'm stuck. I don't know what the right move is. Part of me wants to do some kind of cleansing, but I also don't want to go barging in with fear and make everything feel more hostile. Not all of the energy there feels bad. Some of it feels neutral, maybe even old and sad more than malicious. I want to be respectful if there really is something lingering there. But respect only goes so far when the person you love is afraid to be in his own home. His lease ends in May, and we're supposed to move in together after that. I'm counting the days, honestly. But between now and then, I'm worried about his safety, his stress, his sleep, his peace of mind. I'm worried that whatever is in that apartment, or whatever is attached to those objects, is feeding on fear and instability. And I hate saying that out loud, because it sounds dramatic, but living through it has been worse than it sounds. At this point, I'm just trying to hold on to what's true. Adrian is scared. The atmosphere in that apartment feels wrong. The gas being turned on is not something I can shrug off. And whatever the explanation is, paranormal or not, something has to change. I just want him out of there safely. That's really all I care about now. I want to tell you about something that happened to me that still gives me chills when I think about it. Back in college, I was in a deeply unhealthy relationship with a man who was much older than me. There was a big power imbalance in more ways than one, and at the time, I didn't fully understand just how damaging it all was. He was married, though supposedly separated, and the whole situation eventually collapsed in a spectacular mess. After everything came out, he more or less disappeared from town, and after I graduated, I moved away and never spoke to him again. That was nearly a decade ago. I'll call him Stefan. And my closest friend from those years, the one who stood by me through all of it, I'll call Maya. She matters later. For the last 5 years, I've been living with my wonderful, very age-appropriate partner in a tiny apartment. Recently, while we were doing a big kitchen clean-out, I found something in the back of a cabinet among old glasses and random stuff we never use. It was a glass from Stefan's wedding. It had his last name on it, along with the year he got married. And the moment I saw it, my whole body just reacted. I felt sick, shaky, completely thrown, because I had absolutely no idea how that glass ended up in my home. As far as I can tell, there are only a few possibilities. Either he gave it to me at some point, or I took it from his place at some point. But honestly, both of those feel almost impossible. Why would I want a keepsake tied to his marriage? Why would he hand me something like that? And if it had been mine all these years, how did I carry it through move after move after move without ever once noticing it or remembering it? The last possibility felt both absurd and somehow the most believable. My apartment had come partially furnished when we moved in, and the kitchen already had a bunch of leftover stuff in it. I also know Stefan had some connection to this city. I think family, maybe. So suddenly I was staring at this object and wondering whether he had lived in this very place before me. That thought unsettled me more than I can explain. I showed Maya a picture of the glass, and she immediately said, "You need to get rid of it." She was right, but for some reason, I didn't want to do it alone. So I left it alone for a while. Just let it sit there, which is such a human thing to do with something eerie and emotionally loaded. Pretend it doesn't exist and hope your nervous system files no complaint. Then, about a month and a half later, Maya came to visit me in early February. While she was here, I told her I was finally ready. We put the glass in a thick paper bag, carried it down to the garbage area, and each took a turn smashing it. Then we threw it out for good. And I can't really explain this part without sounding dramatic, but the second it was gone, I felt lighter. Not in some huge theatrical way, just clearer, looser, like something stale had finally left the room. We burned a little incense afterward, just to mark the moment, and went back upstairs feeling strangely calm. The thing is, for the past few years, I felt stuck in my life. Trapped, almost. My partner and I have been crammed into this tiny, cluttered apartment, trying to stay afloat, trying to make plans for a better future. And it's felt like this low, gray heaviness has followed me around for a long time. Now, rationally, I know the apartment was too small and frustrating whether that glass existed or not. We had already outgrown it. We were already hoping for change. But still, I can't ignore the timing. I can't ignore the weirdness of finding that object, not knowing how it got there, and then feeling something shift after finally destroying it. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was just one of those deeply symbolic moments where your outer life catches up with something your inner life has needed for years. But whatever it was, it felt real to me. And honestly, I think sometimes that matters just as much. I want to tell you about something that has stayed with me for years, and even now, I still do not fully know what to make of it. Back in 2004, I had the chance to visit the Netherlands, and while I was there, I saw Vincent van Gogh's Wheat Field with Crows in person. It left a deep impression on me. I was such a huge admirer of Van Gogh that I bought a print of it and hung it up in my bedroom when I got home. At the time, it just felt like bringing back a piece of something beautiful and powerful. Not long after that, though, life became very difficult. In 2005, I was in college, and that year was one of the hardest seasons I can remember, both emotionally and academically. At first, I brushed it off as life simply being hard, but later, after reading more about Van Gogh's mental and emotional state around the time he painted Wheatfield with Crows, I started to wonder whether keeping that image so close to me had somehow affected the atmosphere around me. Maybe that sounds strange, I know. Still, the feeling was strong enough that I took the print down, rolled it up, and tucked it away. The following year, things began to ease. I felt steadier. My studies improved. My personal life became lighter too. Whether that had anything to do with the painting, I honestly could not say, but I noticed it. Then, in 2025, while sorting through old belongings, I came across that same print again. I stood there holding it, and I remember thinking, surely an object cannot carry that kind of weight. Surely a print is just paper and ink. So I decided to hang it in my office. But even that felt odd from the start. It would not stay up. I used different pins, repositioned it more than once, and somehow it kept falling down. Part of me laughed it off, but another part of me quietly wondered if I was making a mistake. Eventually, it stayed on the wall. And then, little by little, everything seemed to unravel. I was in a major car accident. The car was completely totaled, though somehow I walked away without an injury. Then a close family member passed away, and not long after that, my friend Daniel died unexpectedly. He was far too young, and his loss shook me deeply. Around the same time, I also lost both of my dogs in a terrible accident. My mother had to undergo a minor operation as well, though thankfully she recovered well. After all of that, I took the print down again. I rolled it up, put it away, and left it there. And once again, in time, life seemed to settle. I know how this sounds. I know there are logical explanations, and maybe this was all nothing more than coincidence stitched together by grief and memory. I am not claiming the print is cursed, but I cannot deny that the pattern has stayed with me, and I still find myself wondering whether there was some connection, however impossible that may seem. What makes it even stranger to me is that I love Van Gogh's work. I have other prints, including Starry Night, and they have never brought me anything but peace and admiration. I am deeply drawn to his art and to the story of his life. So I suppose what I am really asking is this: have you ever had an experience like this with a painting, a print, or even just an ordinary object that seemed to carry an energy you could not explain? You know those places that feel strange the second you step inside? Mara's house was like that for me. Years ago, when my husband was still my boyfriend, we stayed there for a couple of nights to house sit and pet sit while she was out of town. We were young, no kids yet, and she even left us her card so we could grab breakfast in the morning. Naturally, we accepted, because apparently free breakfast is enough to make people ignore every bad feeling in their body. The house was old, the kind of old that seemed to hold on to things. People in the family always talked about odd activity there, and even before that night, I'd felt like something in the house was watching. Nothing dramatic, just a presence. Heavy, quiet, waiting. What made it even stranger was the history around it. A few years later, my husband told a coworker about what happened to us there, and the man went pale. He said he'd actually gone to that exact house with a paranormal investigation team, and they had to leave because of the basement. That basement had a dirt floor, which somehow makes everything worse, because apparently human beings built stairs into nightmares and called it architecture. Before our stay, Mara had told us how the little kids in the family used to talk about seeing 3 figures there: an old woman, a little girl, and what they called the Dragon Man. They were all around toddler age at the time, just old enough to talk clearly, and they kept describing those same three figures over and over. That stayed in the back of my mind. So we got there that evening, and the first odd thing happened right away. Mara had this dog, a red-nosed pit bull, sweet with her, but usually not good with men. I remember telling my boyfriend to wait while I got the dog settled first. But the second we walked in, that dog completely ignored me, ran straight past, jumped up on him, and started licking his face like they'd known each other forever. I just stood there staring, thinking, well, that's not normal. I showed him around the house after that. In the kitchen, there was this one exact spot on the floor where every dog Mara had ever owned would scratch for no reason. Different dogs, same place, every single time. The house itself had a strange layout too, especially upstairs. And at the time, the bathroom didn't even have a real door, just a curtain hanging in the doorway. She was fixing up the place while living in it, doing her best, but the whole house had this unsettled feeling to it. That night, we stayed on this big couch in the living room, watching a movie until we fell asleep. And that's when everything started. We kept waking up at the same time, not once, over and over. No loud noise, no dog barking, no reason at all. We'd both just open our eyes, look at each other, and then look toward the kitchen. After the first couple of times, the dog had moved and was practically pressed against my boyfriend, almost like he was guarding him. I remember noticing the bathroom curtain moving too, slowly, even though there wasn't any fan running and no window open. Every time I woke up, I had the same awful feeling. It felt like something was standing in that kitchen, just staring at us. Not moving, just watching. By the last time we woke up, I was already on edge, but then I looked at him and my stomach dropped. He'd been wearing a silver chain all night. I had seen it every single time we woke up, but now it was gone. Just gone. And on both sides of his neck were bruises, long and dark, shaped like fingers. It looked like someone had grabbed him by the throat. The second we walked in, she looked at his neck and panicked. She asked what happened, and we told her everything. Then we told her which house it was. She stopped cold and said, "Wait, the one that sits back off the road by itself? Across from where the drive-thru is now?" We said yes. Then she told us something that changed everything. That house had belonged to my husband's family generations earlier. It was his great-grandparents' home. His grandfather had grown up there with his siblings. There was even an old family photo of them standing in front of that very house. And then the pieces started falling into place. His mom told us his great-grandmother had died choking in that house. The old woman. She also told us one of his grandfather's sisters had died there as a little girl from pneumonia. The little girl. When we told her about the dragon man the children kept seeing, and about the spot in the kitchen where the dogs always scratched, she got quiet. Then she told us a darker part of the family story. Years before, while my husband's great-grandfather was away working, his great-grandmother had been assaulted and became pregnant. The baby was kept and raised by the family, but the man responsible disappeared. No one knew what happened to him. And maybe this was just us trying to make sense of something senseless, but all of us had the same thought at once. What if the dragon man was him? What if he was somehow still there? That thought got even harder to shake later on. At one point, another cousin and my husband's mother went down into the basement and found a pile of things that had gone missing over the years. Random stuff people had looked for and never found. And mixed in with it was his silver chain. They said when they got closer, something growled at them from the darkness, and they ran right back out. Frankly, a sensible decision for once. Even that paranormal team I mentioned earlier barely lasted a minute in the basement before leaving. So when I tell you this story, I know how it sounds. I really do. If I hadn't lived through it myself, I'd probably be the first person trying to come up with a logical explanation. but I saw that chain around his neck every time we woke up. I saw those bruises. I felt that presence in the kitchen. And some things are a lot harder to dismiss when you've been the one lying there in the dark. I want to start by being honest with you. I'm 68 years old, and I'm living with advanced multiple myeloma throughout my body. On top of that, I've also been dealing with a few other serious health conditions. So the truth is, I know my time is limited. Of course, in a way, that's true for all of us. We're all moving toward the same ending. The only mystery is when it comes and what carries us there. I joined this group because I've had experiences in my life that I still can't explain. And I guess I'm in a strange place spiritually. I'd call myself mostly agnostic, but I also can't shake the feeling that there's something beyond all of this, something bigger than what we can see. Then again, maybe part of that is just me being human, not wanting to believe everything simply goes dark when we die. When I read through the posts here, I find myself relating to so many of you. Over the years, I've taken those personality tests people hand out at work and in different programs, and I always seem to land right in the middle, half drawn to logic and evidence, half drawn to mystery and faith. It's been a real struggle inside me. I want clarity. I want something solid to hold on to, especially now. There are a couple of questions I've been carrying, and I hope you'll hear them in the spirit they're meant. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm sincerely trying to understand. If you believe in God, what is it that makes you believe? When I asked myself that question, I had to be very honest. A lot of what I once called belief seemed deeply tied to how I was raised and what my parents believed. And when I stripped all that back, I realized I wasn't always sure what was truly mine. Then I asked myself why I still feel there's something more out there, and why it's so hard for me to accept the idea that death might simply be the end. The best answer I could come up with was this. Part of it comes from the things I've experienced that I can't explain, and part of it comes from my own sense of self, that deeply human part of me that wants to continue somehow. I think a lot of us carry that. Maybe it's ego, maybe it's hope, maybe it's something deeper. I honestly don't know. And yet, some people seem able to accept that this life is all there is, and that when it ends, it ends. I don't fully understand how they make peace with that, but I know some do. So I'm asking you, sincerely, what do you believe and why? Maybe something you say will give me a new path to explore. Maybe your words will help me understand myself a little better. Maybe something will click in a way nothing else has. I'm not looking for a perfect answer. I don't think there is one. I'm just hoping for an honest one. And truly, I mean no offense by any of this. I believe there's room here for every perspective. There's no wrong answer. Have you ever had a feeling so strong it didn't seem like a feeling at all, but more like your whole body knew something before your mind could catch up? That's what it's been like for me for as long as I can remember. I've always been really sensitive to people's emotions. I can pick up on someone's mood, their pain, the energy around them, sometimes even from something as small as a text message. At times, it's so intense that I actually feel it physically, like this deep ache in my chest that comes out of nowhere. A few years ago, before my father passed, I had this heavy, awful sensation sitting in my chest for days. I didn't understand it at the time. I just kept thinking, over and over, that death was near. The strange part was, I wasn't in contact with my father then, and I had no idea he was so close to the end. But something in me seemed to know. I've also had moments after people passed where I felt them around me so clearly it was hard to explain away. After my brother Rowan died, I felt him near me one night, as if he'd come just to let me know he was there. I remember feeling what seemed like a gentle squeeze on my arm. Another time, I set 2 chairs facing each other in my living room, and I just sat there with this overwhelming sense that we were having a real conversation somehow. At my father's funeral, I could see him so vividly in my mind. It felt as though he was standing right there in front of his casket, calm and present, telling me everything was proper, that everything was as it should be. A few days later, I felt him again in my kitchen, so strongly that I stopped what I was doing and just stood there. There have also been a couple of moments that still unsettle me because they felt so specific. Once, my dog was completely fine, healthy as far as anyone knew, and out of nowhere, I got this sinking certainty that he was going to die the next day. And then he did. It was heartbreaking. Another time, I had the phrase "heart attack" stuck in my head all day. It kept repeating, almost absurdly, like a song lyric I couldn't get rid of. I even joked about it without understanding why it wouldn't leave me alone. That evening, Rowan died from a heart attack. That one has stayed with me in a way I can't really describe. I don't love having experiences like this. They've scared me, and at one point the feelings became so overwhelming that I had to start medication just to quiet everything down and get some rest. I was exhausted, overstimulated, and even waking up frightened in the night. So I had to take a step back and protect my peace. I still don't know exactly what to call all of this. Maybe it's clairsentience. Maybe it's grief, intuition, sensitivity, or some combination of things nobody fully understands. I just know these experiences have felt real to me. And I guess what I really want to know is this. Has anyone else ever felt like they sensed a death before it happened? Has anyone else carried something like that? So, this happened about 3 years ago when I moved with my family into a small apartment building. At first, everything felt completely ordinary. It was quiet, nothing unusual, just a normal place to live. Then, about a year later, a new neighbor moved into the room right next to ours. She was an older woman, maybe in her late 50s or 60s. For the first couple of weeks, nothing really stood out about her. She kept to herself, and life went on like usual. But one afternoon, my mom and I saw her doing something outside her door that honestly unsettled us. She was holding a broom, and she had this container with some yellowish liquid in it. She would step out of her room, pour a little of the liquid onto the floor, then start sweeping in this repetitive way. Then she would go back inside, come out again, pour more, and sweep again. She repeated it over and over, almost like she was performing some kind of ritual. When she was done, she just walked back into her room as if it were completely normal. A few minutes later, she left the building, and I remember standing there with another neighbor, just talking about how strange it all was. That was only the beginning. The next week, things started getting a lot worse, especially at night. We began hearing her shouting inside her room, like she was having a full-blown argument with someone. It wasn't just talking loudly either. It sounded intense, like a real fight. There was yelling, swearing, and sometimes noises that made it sound like she was hitting someone or throwing things around. The disturbing part was that, as far as anyone knew, she lived alone. People in the building got curious and nervous, so a few neighbors tried to check from outside near the window where you could sometimes see into part of the room. And every time, there was no one else there. No visitor, no second person, nobody. But the sounds kept happening, and enough people heard it that it became something everyone whispered about. People were genuinely scared. This went on for around 2 months while she was living there. Then one of the neighbors said they'd been seeing her almost every night around 3 a.m. up on the terrace. They said she would run back and forth with a broom in her hand, her hair completely loose, moving in this really unnatural way, bent forward like her posture wasn't quite right. I never saw that part myself, so I can't claim it as something I witnessed directly, but a lot of nights we did hear footsteps running across the terrace around that same time. Eventually, she moved out, and just like that, the shouting stopped. The running sounds stopped. Everything went quiet again. But the part that still bothers me didn't end there. Ever since that time, I've been seeing something in the apartment that I still can't explain. It looks like a pale, human-shaped figure, almost like the outline of a woman, maybe someone in her 20s. It isn't dark like a normal shadow. It's white, or kind of faintly glowing. I only ever see it in darker parts of the apartment, and whenever it appears, it stays there for several seconds, sometimes 7 or 8, before fading. Sometimes it even seems to shift slightly, like it's moving just a little. And this is not a one-time thing. It happens a lot. Honestly, almost every day. Just yesterday, I was alone on the terrace, talking to friends, and I was sitting near the staircase by this brick support next to the water tank. Out of nowhere, I saw that figure come up the stairs, move close to where I was, and then disappear. It happened so suddenly, but clearly enough that I know I saw something. It also usually happens when I'm alone. I can be distracted in the middle of talking to someone or doing something else, and I'll still suddenly notice it. This has been going on for about 2 years now, and I still don't know what to make of it. I'm not saying it's a ghost. I honestly don't know what it is. But after everything that happened with that neighbor, and the fact that I keep seeing this figure in the same place over and over again, it's hard not to feel unsettled. I still catch myself wondering whether it's just my mind playing tricks on me, or whether something about that time never really left. I want to tell you about my Nana's house, because honestly, it feels like the heart of our whole family. The place is more than a century old, sitting right in the historic part of town where every street seems to carry some old story. Nana and my pop have lived there for well over 60 years, and for as long as I can remember, that house has held all of us together. They raised 5 children there, and later all of us grandkids seem to grow up inside those walls too. Birthdays, holidays, grief, laughter, all of it somehow ended up in that house. But there was always one room that felt different. We used to call it the Violet Room. It was impossible to miss. The walls, the trim, even the high ceiling were all painted in this faded lavender shade, and it was filled with old furniture, family portraits, and the kind of quiet that made you lower your voice without even thinking about it. Every time you passed by, you had this strange feeling that someone was already in there, just watching quietly. Not in a cruel way, not even in a threatening way. It was more like you had stepped into a place that belonged to someone else, and they weren't thrilled about being disturbed. The first time anything ever really happened to me in that room, I was 13. It was not long after my mother's funeral. I was sitting there alone, crying into my hands on a little settee near the wall, just completely overwhelmed. Then I felt the cushion dip beside me, like someone had come in and sat down close. I heard the soft shift of weight. I remember thinking it was Nana coming to comfort me, so I turned and reached out to hug her. But there was no one there. I can still remember the feeling of my arms just falling into empty air. At the time, I told myself maybe it was my mother. Maybe that was wishful thinking. Maybe grief does strange things. I still do not know. But after that, even when nothing happened for years, I never lost the feeling that the room was never truly empty. Then years passed. 14, maybe a little more. A few weeks ago, my sister and I went to stay with Nana after she had a health scare. By then, the old settee had been replaced with a narrow iron bed, and for the first time in my life, I ended up sleeping in that room overnight. I tried not to let the old memories get to me. I told myself I was too grown for that kind of fear, and eventually, I drifted off. The first time I woke up, I heard this faint rustling sound. Soft movement, like someone shifting their feet. I was too sleepy to think much of it, and I just sank back under. The second time it happened again, only louder, nearer. I cracked one eye open and honestly assumed it was my sister. She was pregnant at the time, and I figured she was wandering the hallway or coming in to ask me something. But the door was closed, completely closed, and the moment I looked toward it, everything went still. I lay there for a minute, listening, then convinced myself it had to be something in the hallway. An old house makes noise, right? That is what I told myself anyway. Then it happened a third time. There was a soft tap against the metal bed frame, followed by the long groan of a floorboard right beside me. That sound pulled me fully awake. I pushed myself up on my elbows, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stared at the door first, still shut. Then I listened. The floor creaked again. Slowly, not faded, not trailed off. Stopped. And in that moment, the strangest thought hit me. It did not feel like I had been threatened. It felt like I had been looked over, studied. I barely slept after that. The next morning, I told my sister everything, and she got this look on her face that made my stomach turn. Then she said, "You know, no one slept in that room since it was Mom's room back in the 70s. You're the first one in all that time. Maybe it just wanted to see who was in there." I hated how much that made sense. I still do not think whatever was there meant me harm. I really do not. But I also know this much for sure. I will never spend another night in the Violet Room. I live in a house that was built in 1969, and it was the very first one on the street. My family bought it from the original owners in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. And honestly, during that first year living here, I went through two experiences that completely changed the way I think about the paranormal. The first one still gives me chills when I talk about it. It happened in the middle of the night, around 3:15 a.m. I was asleep in bed, facing the wall, because my bed was pushed right up against it. Out of nowhere, I heard my bedroom door handle turn, and then I heard the door slowly creak open. I froze. I remember glancing back over my shoulder, still half asleep, trying to figure out if maybe it was my mom or my stepdad coming in for some reason. But when I turned all the way around to look, the door was shut. Completely shut. I cannot explain the fear that hit me in that moment. I just sat there staring, too scared to move. After a minute, I got out of bed and stood by the door, trying to build up the courage to open it. When I finally did, the hallway was empty. Every door was closed. No one was there. Even my cat, who usually follows me everywhere and always seems to be underfoot, wasn't around. I still don't know how I managed to go back to sleep after that, but somehow I did. The next morning, I asked my mom if she had opened my door during the night. She said no. My stepdad said no too. That was the moment I stopped brushing things off. That was the moment I really started to believe something in this house might not be easy to explain. The second experience happened not long after that. I was sitting at my desk, just working on my computer, totally focused on what I was doing. Then suddenly, a cotton ball dropped right in front of my face. Not off to the side, not from across the room, right in front of me. It startled me so badly. I just sat there in shock, trying to understand how that could have happened. I did have some cotton balls nearby, and there was a fan in the room, so I tried to be rational about it. I thought maybe the fan had somehow blown one toward me. But the thing is, that didn't make sense. I actually tested it afterward. I tossed a cotton ball toward the fan, and it just fell. I even threw one up into the air to see if the airflow would catch it, and it still just dropped. There was no way that fan could have made one float out and land like that right in front of my face. Since then, other things have happened in the house too. My stepdad has woken up after hearing what sounded like screaming right into his ear. My mom has seen someone walk past her room more than once, even when no one was there. And me, I still hear little things at night sometimes. Small sounds in my room, like something shifting or moving when everything should be still. I've gotten so used to it that it doesn't scare me the way it used to, which is probably the strangest part of all. So that's my story. I wanted to share it with you because these experiences felt real, and they've stayed with me. Maybe it's one spirit. Maybe it's more than one. I honestly don't know. I just know this house has never felt completely empty. I want to tell you about something that happened to me more than 30 years ago, and even now, I still don't know what to make of it. I was 6 years old, spending the summer in the countryside with my grandmother when I disappeared for 2 days. That Sunday morning, the house woke up early like it always did. My grandmother and uncle had gone out to feed the animals before church, and when they came back to get the rest of us ready, I was gone. My shoes were still there by the bed. The only things missing were the clothes I'd slept in. Everyone panicked. The police were called, my parents were contacted from hundreds of kilometers away, and people searched the area with dogs, but there was nothing. No trail. No explanation. 2 days later, some hunters found me deep in the woods, around 11 kilometers away from my grandmother's house. What unsettled everyone was that I didn't look like a child who had been lost in a forest for 2 days. I wasn't dirty. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't crying. I was calm. I was carrying a book, and I was wearing clothes that were too small for me, like they belonged to another child. And the strangest part was this. I had shoes on my feet, even though the shoes I had worn before disappearing were still back at the house. When the police questioned me, I said things no 6-year-old should have been saying. I told them I had come from a school, but not the kind children normally go to. I said they had taught me how to be myself, who I was supposed to be, how I should act. I said there were many children there, boys and girls together, and that we slept in one room and ate simple food, mostly vegetables. I remember saying that when we looked through the windows, it was like seeing water everywhere, as if we were underwater, except there were no fish. All the adults looked alike, and we called each of them only teacher. I also told them that each child had been given a life to learn. We were shown families on screens, and we had to study them. The book I was found holding apparently had photographs of my relatives, neighbors, family friends, even people from the daycare I had attended. I could identify them by name, but I couldn't say anything personal about them. It was as if I had memorized a role without living any of it. The hardest part came when I was brought home. My mother looked at me and said I was not her son. She said the birthmark on my left ear was gone, a mark she knew well because she had refused to let doctors remove it when I was born. She went back to the police with photographs, insisting that the child they had returned to her was not me. They filed her complaint, but no one truly listened. And it wasn't just her. My grandmother had several dogs around the house, and they no longer recognized me. They barked and snarled until my uncle had to keep them locked away for days. My mother still took care of me after that, but there was always a distance in her, as if she were waiting for someone else to come back. A few months later, another strange detail came up. Before I vanished, I'd had a small procedure on my tongue because it was affecting my speech. After I returned, the doctor checked and said there was no sign it had ever been done. My tongue tie was there again, thicker than before. I had also once cut my foot badly on broken glass, and that scar was gone too. My mother never forgot any of this. Neither did I. As I grew older, that feeling never left me. The feeling that I had arrived in the middle of someone else's story. I knew people, but I didn't feel connected to them. I spoke when spoken to. I was quiet, distant. My mother would sometimes look at me and ask, "Who are you?" or "Where is my son?" Those words stay with a person. Later, I built a life. I studied, joined the military, became a pilot, and served for many years. Flying gave me peace in a way nothing else did. Being alone felt natural to me, almost necessary. I lived normally on the outside, but underneath that, I always carried the same question. If a child really was taken that night, why was I the one left behind? Years later, after a relative found parts of the old police file, I tried to investigate it myself. I read transcripts. I looked for records. I followed every thread I could. Some of it led nowhere. Some of it only made things stranger. The hunters, for example, told police they thought they had seen another figure with me in the woods just before they reached us. Maybe a woman, maybe older, wearing something dark green. They said that person seemed to wave and then vanished. Near a creek, they found barefoot prints larger than mine, not a child's. Then there was something else. Before deployment overseas, I went through routine medical testing. The doctors found that I had no measurable immunity from my childhood vaccinations. They repeated everything. That alone proves nothing, I know. But it was one more loose thread in a story already full of them. At one point, I even tried hypnosis. It wasn't supposed to be about the disappearance at all. I went because I wanted to stop smoking. But during the session, when the therapist called me by my name, I corrected her. I told her that wasn't my name. When she asked what she should call me, I said, "Call me by my real name. I'm B72. Not B71, B72. I still don't know why that was the number that came out of me. I told her a nun had given me that name, a woman in a dark red robe with her hair covered, someone who taught me how to dress, wash, eat, and behave. The therapist stopped the session soon after. I never went back. So that is what I'm left with. A vanished birthmark, missing scars, no memory of my early childhood, strange statements on police tapes, a mother who believed until the end that I was not the child she gave birth to, and somewhere inside me, a quiet certainty that something happened in those 2 days, something no one ever truly explained. I can't tell you exactly what it was. I can't point to one theory and say, that's the answer. But I've lived my whole life with the sense that I was placed into a family that was waiting for someone else. And sometimes I still wonder about that other boy. If he was real, if he remembers anything, if he ever missed us, or if he also woke up one day in a life that did not feel like his own. I still think about this sometimes, and even now it gives me that same feeling in my chest. This happened about 6 years ago, back when I was living alone in a small apartment on the second floor of a pretty ordinary building. There was nothing especially eerie about the place. It looked normal, felt normal, and the neighborhood was usually so quiet at night you could hear the hum of the hallway lights. One night, I woke up suddenly to 3 loud knocks on my front door. Knock, knock, knock. I remember lying there for a second, trying to figure out if I was still half asleep. Then I grabbed my phone and saw it was 3:07 in the morning. And right away, that felt wrong. Nobody knocks on your door at that hour unless something's happened. So I got up and walked to the door, still groggy, and looked through the peephole. There was no one there. I just stood there, staring down the hallway, waiting to catch someone turning the corner or heading for the stairs. But the hall was completely empty. My apartment faced a long, straight stretch, so there's no way someone could have knocked and disappeared that fast without me seeing them. I told myself maybe I'd dreamed it. You know how your mind tries to smooth things over when something doesn't make sense? So I went back to bed. About 15 minutes later, it happened again. 3 knocks, same rhythm, same force. This time, I got to the door almost immediately and looked out again. Still nothing. No footsteps, no doors closing, no sound from the elevator. Just silence. That was the moment it really got under my skin. I didn't even consider opening the door after that. I went straight to the couch and sat there with all the lights off, just watching the entrance like that was somehow going to make me feel more in control. Human beings really do love pretending a couch turns them into a security system. Nothing else happened for the rest of the night. The next morning, I mentioned it to the woman across the hall. I asked if she'd heard anyone knocking on my door in the middle of the night. She looked at me for a second and said, "Was it 3 knocks?" The second she said that, my whole body went cold. I told her yes. And then she said the person who lived in my apartment before me had complained about the same thing. Same pattern, same time of night. 3 knocks and no one there. I stayed in that apartment for another 7 months after that. It never happened again. But I'll tell you this, and I mean it. I never once went near that door after a late-night knock without my heart pounding. Some things only have to happen once or twice before they stay with you. I want to tell this carefully because I know how this sounds, and believe me, I have tried very hard to explain it in every rational way first. Before I get into the strange part, I need you to know this. We are not the kind of family that ignores mental health or jumps straight to wild conclusions. We talk openly with each other. We stay in touch with doctors. Several people in this house are veterans, so PTSD, stress, sleep issues, all of that has been taken seriously and talked through. I have already ordered security cameras. I am getting a carbon monoxide detector too, and I have even put little bells on a few doors just to keep track of movement. I am doing my best not to let fear get ahead of facts. The house itself has been part of my life for a long time. It belongs to my parents, and I lived here through my teens before I moved out. A few years ago, after my husband left the military, we moved back in to save money and help out, because the house is big enough that we can all fit without living on top of each other. So right now it is me and my husband, my parents, and my grandfather all under one roof. And honestly, the house has always felt a little off. For years, it was mostly small things. Objects would disappear and show up later in odd places. Cabinet doors would be left hanging open when no one remembered touching them. Every now and then, one of us would think we heard our name or catch a shadow in the corner of a room. Nothing dramatic, nothing that felt impossible. We always brushed it off. Background noise, stress, tired eyes, the brain making patterns where there are none. You know, the usual tricks a mind plays on itself. One important detail is my mom has a disability, and during bad flare-ups, she cannot always get comfortably into her bed. When that happens, she and my dad often sleep in recliners in the living room for days at a time because it is just easier on her body. That matters because over the past year, things have gone from mildly unsettling to genuinely hard to explain. A glass dish was knocked right out of my hands one evening. I mean swatted, not slipped. It hit the floor and shattered, even though it was one of those heavy, supposedly unbreakable ones. More than once, we have come home and found every cabinet in the hallway standing open. Lately, the whole house has been waking up at almost the exact same time in the middle of the night, usually somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning. Not one person, not two people, everybody. And there has never been any obvious sound or disturbance that we can point to. Even my sleep tracker shows nothing unusual when it happens. The bathroom light has switched on and off by itself. I have stood in the hallway and seen what looked like a man just standing there. Not moving, not speaking, just there. That alone was enough to rattle me for weeks. And things vanish constantly now. Not just misplaced keys or a missing sock. Important things. One of the strangest examples was my grandmother's social security card turning up inside an old wallet in the garage, tucked away in a place she never would have put it and never even used. But the thing that finally pushed me to tell this story happened tonight. My mom is in another flare right now, so my parents have barely been using their bedroom. She has been keeping a few changes of clothes nearby so she does not have to make the trip back and forth. It has been several days since either of them really spent time in that room. Sitting right in the middle of the bed was a full bag of cat food. Not an empty one, not a torn one the cats dragged around somehow. A full, unopened bag we had only bought recently. The cats are not even allowed in that room, and no one had any reason to carry it in there. No one admits to moving it. No one remembers touching it at all. And that is the part I cannot shake. It was not a tiny object someone could absent-mindedly set down and forget. It was a heavy bag of cat food, placed dead center on a bed in a room nobody had been using. My grandfather lives on the opposite side of the house in his own little suite, and he is not mobile enough for that to make sense either. So that is where I am with this. I am still trying to be practical. I am still looking for real explanations. But I cannot lie to you. I am scared now. What started as little oddities has turned into something that feels deliberate, almost like the house wants to be noticed. And I do not know what to call that. This happened about 6 years ago, when I was in 8th grade. I still remember it so clearly because, at the time, life already felt heavy in ways I didn't really know how to explain. My family was going through some financial problems, and at school, you had to pay for the required gym clothes. I didn't have them yet, so after gym class, I stayed behind to talk with the teachers about it. Because of that, I ended up being the last one left in the locker room. I was just finishing getting changed when I started hearing this strange whistling sound. At first, I honestly thought it was another student messing around, but within a few seconds, I realized it wasn't normal at all. It was this awful, high-pitched whistle, almost melodic in a weird way, like it rose and fell in a sing-song pattern. The strangest part was that it didn't seem to come from one spot. It felt like it was bouncing off every wall, like the whole locker room was making the sound. I tried to ignore it and headed over to where everyone else was waiting by the door for the lunch bell. But the whistling seemed to follow me. So I asked somebody, "Do you hear that?" And they just looked at me like I was confused. Nobody knew what I was talking about. No one else seemed to hear anything at all. That's when it really started to get under my skin. When I got home, I told my friend Mason about it. He was really into paranormal stuff, ghost stories, all of that. He listened, but I could tell he wasn't fully sure whether to believe me or not. Somehow, and I honestly don't even know why, I convinced myself that what I'd heard was some kind of death whistle. I know that sounds dramatic now, but back then I was a kid, and once that idea got into my head, I couldn't shake it. For the next week, I was genuinely scared that something terrible was going to happen to me. Then one night, things got even stranger. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night, probably around 2 or 3 a.m. The room was dark and still, and as I was waking up, I heard what sounded like a woman humming softly under my bed. It only lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it was enough to make my whole body freeze. Then it stopped completely. I just lay there, trying to make sense of it. After maybe 20 minutes, I started telling myself it had to be my imagination. I had LED lights running along the bottom of my bed frame back then, so I could actually see underneath it if I leaned over. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to check. There was nothing there. I finally fell back asleep, but then I woke up again around 5 a.m. This time, I heard growling under my bed. Not a small sound either. It sounded deep, almost like a large dog, or even something wilder. I checked again, heart pounding, and once again there was absolutely nothing there. And that was it. Nothing like that ever happened again after those nights. No more whistling, no more sounds, nothing. But I still think about it sometimes, because even now I can't really explain any of it. Maybe it was stress. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Or maybe it was something I'll never understand. All I know is that, for a little while, it felt like something unseen had attached itself to me, and I've never forgotten how real that fear felt. I'm 24, and I live with my boyfriend Marcus, who's 26, in this old townhouse that was built sometime in the 1920s. It has a lot of character, which used to feel charming. Lately, though, it's just been feeling unsettling. For the last several weeks, I've been having these really strange experiences, mostly when I'm either falling asleep or just starting to wake up. I'll see figures in my room. Usually they look like people, just standing there, but sometimes they seem off somehow, almost twisted or dark in a way I can't really explain. They never stay long. Usually it's only for a minute or two, and if I turn on a light or fully wake myself up, they disappear. That was already creeping me out, but then one night, something happened that honestly scared me more than anything else so far. My boyfriend wasn't supposed to be home that night. He had stayed over at his parents' place because he had to be up early the next morning. I was in bed, just starting to drift off, when I heard someone coming up the stairs. I could hear quiet talking too, like someone was on the phone. It sounded enough like Marcus that I didn't panic. Our bedroom doesn't have a proper door, just a heavy curtain, and I heard it move open like someone had stepped into the room. I was half asleep and facing the wall, and then I felt the mattress sink behind me, like someone had climbed into bed. A second later, I felt what seemed like an arm wrap around my waist. I remember thinking it was him, so I didn't question it. I just started relaxing back into sleep. Then, all at once, it hit me. Marcus wasn't supposed to be there. I went completely awake in an instant. My whole body locked up. I was staring straight at the wall, too scared to even turn around, but I could still feel the weight behind me on the bed and that arm resting around my waist. I was suddenly convinced someone had broken into the house and gotten into bed with me. I lay there frozen for what felt like forever, probably 30 or 40 seconds, trying to decide what to do. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Finally, I thought, I have to do something. So I spent another few seconds just trying to work up the nerve, and then I threw my arm back as hard as I could to hit whoever was behind me. And the second I did, the weight vanished. There was no one there. No one at all. Since that night, I've started noticing things even when I'm fully awake during the day. I'll catch these quick glimpses of someone-shaped figures in the house, usually near my bedroom, by the staircase outside the room, or near the bathroom attached to it. It's always just for a split second. I'll think I saw a person standing there, but the moment I turn and look straight at it, it's gone. They've never spoken to me. They've never touched me again. But some of them look deeply unsettling, and I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. I'm not taking any new medication. Nothing major in my life has changed recently, and my stress level is pretty normal for me. That's part of why this feels so hard to explain. I'm planning to see a doctor soon because whatever this is, it's starting to scare me in a real way. I don't have a primary care doctor right now, so I'm still figuring out where to start. I just know I can't keep pretending it's nothing. I'm lying here under the blankets while I say all this, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. And honestly, I'm scared to go to sleep. But I needed to tell someone exactly what's been happening, because I don't know what to make of it anymore. Hello everyone watching the Paranormal M channel. Where are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for sharing your paranormal experiences with me. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss more spooky stories. Now, let's get into my favorite part, telling you about my own paranormal experiences. Alright, it's bedtime. Put on your headphones, grab your blanket, and get cozy. So, my mom had gone off on a little holiday, which meant I was staying with my dad for a few days. And we were in full survival mode, ordering food for lunch, ordering food for dinner, just living that lazy life. That night, Dad looks at me and goes, "Hey, can you grab chicken rice from that place nearby? The one a few streets down?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, easy." So I bike over, pick it up, and on the way back I park my bike and start walking the last bit to our apartment. But here's the thing, there was construction happening right at the main gate, so residents couldn't use the normal entrance. We had to take this alternate route that was, honestly, kind of gross. Narrow path, uneven ground, overgrown plants everywhere, thick trees leaning in like they're listening to you. And of course, because I'm me, I'm walking with the chicken rice in one hand and scrolling reels on my phone with the other, not even looking up properly. Then I hear it. This rustling, right in the bushes beside the path. I freeze for like half a second, but then I tell myself, "Relax, Rylan, it's probably a lizard, or a rat, or just the wind. Something small, something normal." So I keep going. I reach the apartment gate, just a basic metal gate, nothing fancy, and I unlatch it, step inside, and hook it back behind me like usual. Then I start climbing the stairs. I pass the first floor, heading up toward the second, and bang! The gate behind me starts shaking like it's about to rip off its hinges. Not a gentle rattle, not a wind pushed it kind of shake. Violent, like somebody was throwing their whole body into it, like they were desperate, like they needed to get in. My heart went straight up into my throat, and here's the part where I admit something embarrassing. Instead of doing the smart thing, like running upstairs and locking the door, I turned around. Yeah, I went back down. I'm creeping down the steps, chicken rice still in my hand like that's going to protect me. And I get to the gate and nothing. Just stillness. The gate isn't moving. No footsteps, no shadow, no voice, no anything. I stare through the bars, empty. I even unlatched it and looked out onto the path, expecting maybe a stray dog or someone messing around. Nothing. To convince myself I wasn't imagining it, I grabbed the gate and shook it a little, like, could it have just done that? But it didn't feel loose. It didn't feel like it would bang like that on its own. Still, I forced myself to laugh it off. Okay, whatever. Probably some weird coincidence. So I go upstairs, eat dinner with my dad, watch a bit of TV, act normal. Eventually, I climb into bed. Later that night, I'm texting a friend about it like, "Bro, the gate went crazy. I thought it was a dog or something." And while I'm typing, it just hits me, like a cold drop in my stomach. The construction people had cleared out all the stray dogs in the area earlier that week. They'd been complaining about them hanging around the site. There weren't any dogs left. I just stared at my phone, rereading what I wrote, and I swear my hands started trembling. My skin went prickly. My chest felt tight like I couldn't get a full breath. Because if it wasn't a dog, then what the hell was it? That banging felt real, like something was right there on the other side of that gate, and it wanted in. So I've kind of grown up with the feeling that my house isn't just our house, you know? Like there's always been something else around. Not constantly in your face, but enough that you learn what it feels like when the air shifts a little. My mom's the main magnet, honestly. She's had weird paranormal stuff happen to her whole life, so if anything in our house is going to reach out to someone, it's her. Me? I try really hard to pretend I don't notice anything. I'm fine with spooky stories anywhere else, but in my own home? No thanks. If I'm heading down to the basement at night to switch the laundry or grab something from storage, I'm suddenly the biggest believer in speed walking and not looking over my shoulder. I think I've trained myself to block a lot of it out, which is why it really gets to me when something breaks through anyway. Like this one night, more recent, my parents and I were all home. I was in the kitchen rinsing a plate, and my mom was in the living room, just around the corner. My dad walks out of the kitchen toward her, and he calls out her name like, "Hey, Mom," trying to get her attention. And I swear to you, I hear my mom's voice answer from the hallway, right between the kitchen and the living room. This drawn-out, playful, kind of teasing, "Yeah?" Like the silly little tone she uses when she's being dramatic. Except, she wasn't being dramatic. Because immediately after, my actual mom responds from the living room, and she's irritated, like, "What?" in this sharp, annoyed tone, like my dad's bothering her. And I just froze. My stomach dropped. I turned and went, "Dad, did you hear that?" And he just looked at me like I had grown a second head. Nothing. Only me. That exact spot in the hallway, same place, was involved again a few days later. My mom told me she heard my voice call out for her, really urgent. Like, "Mom!" Drawn out and stressed, like I needed help right that second. And here's the thing, I wasn't even home. I was at the gym across town. She said she genuinely thought I'd come home early and rushed upstairs, like I'd maybe gotten hurt or something. She called me immediately, actually panicked, just to make sure I was okay. Because with her, it's not just, "Oh, that's creepy." She's the kind of person who believes she can sense things before they happen, or feel when someone's in trouble. So for her to hear that kind of urgent call, it wasn't just unsettling, it felt like a warning. And it made the whole thing even worse, because it didn't feel random. It felt intentional. This isn't even new either. Years ago, again right near that hallway, I was in my room alone. No TV on, no music, nothing. Just quiet. And I hear my great-aunt's voice clear as day, right behind my bedroom door, like she was standing there. She had passed away not long before that, and she had this really distinct, warm little twang, like nobody else in my family. And she goes, "Hi, Rena." Not my exact name, just close enough that it still hit me like ice water. I got full-body chills, like that cold rush up your spine. I didn't even think. I just bolted out of my room and practically sprinted into my parents' bedroom like, okay, no, absolutely not. I just heard her. I just heard her voice. And it's not only voices. Sometimes it's the sounds, like someone doing something very physical. One time, we were all in the kitchen, me, my mom, my dad, just talking. And we hear this loud dragging sound from the dining room. Not one chair, not a little scrape. It sounded like every single heavy dining chair was being pulled out across the hardwood floor, one after another. This long, solid, unmistakable screech of wood moving. We all stopped mid-sentence and just stared at each other, wide-eyed, like, "Are you hearing this too?" And when it finally stopped, we walked into the dining room together, like a little scared parade, and every chair was pulled out. All of them. Like someone had just gotten up from a very chaotic family dinner. But nobody had been in there. No pets, no draft strong enough to do that. And we'd heard the whole thing. We also hear the front door a lot, like the sound of it opening and shutting when nobody's coming in. Sometimes it's faint. Sometimes it's loud enough that you automatically look up like, "Oh, someone's home." And then, nothing. There's honestly so much more. My mom has seen things that I'm grateful I haven't. But we've kind of fallen into this weird routine where we either ignore it or we'll say out loud, "Stop. Seriously, stop." Like you're scolding a misbehaving cat you can't see. And lately, the activity feels a little more frequent, a little louder, like it's testing how much we'll react. I'm just really hoping this little spike doesn't keep going, because I can handle a lot, but I don't want to live in a house where the hallway answers you back in your mom's voice when your mom didn't say a word. So, when I was little, I lived at my grandparents' place for a while. It was one of those older houses that looks totally normal in the daylight. Family photos, creaky stairs, the smell of tea and laundry. And then the second the sun went down, the whole place felt like it had a pulse of its own. And it wasn't just me being a kid with an imagination. Anyone who stayed over said the same thing. The air felt off, like you were sharing the space with something you couldn't see, and it didn't want you getting too comfortable. My mom and her siblings grew up there, and every single one of them had at least one, "Nope, absolutely not," kind of experience. But there's one night I still can't make sense of, no matter how many times I've tried to replay it. I was around 10, give or take. My cousins and I were all upstairs, doing that late evening kid thing where you're supposed to be winding down, but really you're chasing each other around and whisper screaming and trying not to get caught. There were 3 of us in the mix at that moment. Me, my youngest cousin Ellie, and my middle cousin Mara. We were tearing up and down the hallway, dodging into bedrooms, laughing, daring each other to go further. Mara chased me and Ellie into the spare room at the end of the hall, the one with 2 sets of bunk beds. It had that particular kind of darkness, even with the lights on, like the corners held onto shadows longer than they should. Me and Ellie scrambled onto the top bunk of the bed furthest from the door, both of us giggling and breathless. And then Mara, still laughing, ran back out of the room, flicked the light off, and shut the door behind her. At first, it was just the usual panic, like, "Oh my God, she's going to get in trouble. We're going to get in trouble," that kind of thing. But then, it changed. The second the door clicked, it was like something in the room shifted. Ellie and I didn't just feel scared because it was dark. We felt terror. Instant. Total. Like our bodies knew something our brains hadn't caught up with yet. We grabbed each other and started screaming. These horrible, raw animal sounds. Not even kid being dramatic screams. Like the kind you make when you're genuinely convinced something is about to happen to you. And the weirdest part was, even while I was screaming, a part of my mind kept thinking, "We're going to get told off. Someone will be up here in 2 seconds. Mom will shout. Grandpa will stomp up the stairs. Someone will come." Because our parents were downstairs, and they were strict about noise. You didn't get away with much in that house. But nobody came. We screamed for what felt like forever. If I had to put a number on it now, I'd say at least 15 minutes, maybe more. We didn't stop, not once. We were clinging to each other, shaking, our throats burning, and it was just nothing. No footsteps. No, "Oi, quiet!" No one even calling up the stairs asking what the hell we were doing. Eventually, Ellie, still sobbing, said she was going to try to get to the light. The switch was near the door, and there was another bunk bed closer to it. She said if she could jump from our bed to the nearer one, she might be able to reach the wall and feel her way to the switch. I remember her whispering it like she was planning an escape, like the floor was lava and the dark was alive. She counted herself in, just this tiny, shaky breath, and then she jumped. Not like someone turned the lamp on, not like a car passed outside, not like the glow of a hallway light. It was a flash, white-blue, sharp, huge, like lightning went off inside the bedroom. It filled the whole space. I could see the outlines of the bunk bed frames, the dresser, the curtains, like someone took a photo with a blinding flash right in our faces. Ellie shrieked and launched herself back onto the bunk with me, like she'd been burned. She was crying so hard she couldn't breathe properly, and I was right there with her, screaming again, both of us in complete meltdown. And here's the part that still messes with me. It was pitch black outside. No rain, no storm, no thunder, no distant lightning. Nothing. And it wasn't someone flicking the room light on, because it was way too bright, way too sudden, and we were alone in there. We kept trying to be heard. It felt like the house had swallowed our sound. Eventually, after what had to be close to half an hour, something in us just snapped into survival mode. Still shaking, we forced ourselves off the bunk, held hands so tight it hurt, and stumbled through the dark to the door. We yanked it open and sprinted downstairs like we were being chased. And when we got to the living room, it was almost peaceful. My parents, my grandparents, and my oldest cousin were all sitting there, watching TV. Not loud, not chaotic, just the television on low volume, everyone relaxed, like nothing at all had happened. Ellie and I burst in, crying and babbling and trying to speak over each other. "Didn't you hear us? We were screaming, why didn't you come up? Didn't you hear anything?" And this is the moment that still turns my stomach. They looked at us like they didn't recognize us. Not in a dramatic horror movie way, more like their brains genuinely lagged, like they were staring at two strangers who'd run into their house. It only lasted a couple of seconds, but it was long enough to make my skin go cold. Then it was like the recognition clicked into place. My mom blinked, sort of frowned, and just said, completely honestly, "No, we didn't hear anything." And she wasn't brushing it off. She wasn't being mean. She looked confused, like she truly didn't understand why we were so worked up. Then she turned back to the TV. Everyone did. Like our panic was a weird interruption, but not something that needed solving. For years, I didn't talk about it. I think part of me was afraid that if I tried to explain it out loud, it would sound ridiculous, even though I can still feel that fear in my body when I remember it. But last summer, I finally brought it up to Ellie, kind of cautiously, like, "Do you remember that one night at Nan and Granddad's? The spare room?" And she went quiet and said, "Yes, I remember." She remembered the screaming, the flash, the silence downstairs, all of it. So I don't really know what it was. I don't have a neat explanation that makes everything sit comfortably. All I know is this. For a stretch of time in that room, it felt like we were trapped in a pocket where our voices didn't travel, where the usual rules of the house didn't apply, and something else, something we couldn't see, had stepped in close enough to touch the edges of our world. And even now, if I picture that spare room, I can still feel it. That moment the door clicked shut, and the way the dark suddenly didn't feel empty anymore. So, I want to tell you about something that still catches in my throat when I think about it. About 8 years ago, a girl I went to high school with, her name was Kara, and her brother were killed. It was over something ridiculously small, like a pointless argument that should have ended in an eye roll, not that. It made the news. It was everywhere for a while. And I'll be honest with you, I was shocked. But I didn't fall apart the way some people did. Kara and I had been close once, but we hadn't really spoken since graduation. You know how it goes. Life happens, friendships fade. You blink and suddenly years are gone. I followed the case. They arrested someone pretty quickly, and I watched from a distance. I remember seeing her mom on the TV, this raw, unbearable kind of grief, and I saw the posts from friends who were still in her orbit. It was sad, absolutely, but I kept living. I didn't feel wrecked by it in the way I thought I should. After that, Kara would show up in my dreams sometimes, but honestly, so did other people from school. Random faces from the past, like my brain was flipping through an old yearbook for no reason. Then about a year ago, I had this dream that started out totally ordinary. Messy, nonsensical, dream logic stuff. In the dream, I was back at this job I'd been laid off from the year before. I was walking around the building, talking to random coworkers, like nothing had ever changed. It felt routine, almost boring. And the whole time, there was someone with me. I didn't even question it. That's the weird thing about dreams. You just accept the impossible like it's normal. I can't even remember who I thought it was at first, but I knew I wasn't alone. At some point, the someone sort of became clear. Like the dream finally decided to render the character properly. And it was Kara. She wasn't talking. She was just there, walking beside me like she belonged there, like she'd always been there. And the feeling in the dream, this is hard to explain, was good. Not happy exactly, but warm, safe, like the air itself was softer. We headed toward the exit together. At that old job, the place was fenced in, and you needed a badge to get through the gate. So we're walking toward the gate, side by side, and it feels like we're just leaving at the end of a normal day. And then, right as we reached it, something shifted. The dream snapped into focus. Suddenly, I knew I was dreaming. It became lucid in this clean, startling way, like somebody turned on a light in a dark room. I stopped at the gate and turned to her, and I remember speaking so clearly, like I meant every word with my whole chest. I said, "I really hope you're real, because a lot of people miss you." And Kara, she did this small thing, like she got shy. She looked down and a little to the side, like she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. And she gave this tiny chuckle, almost like she was trying to keep it gentle for me. Then she said, "I am real." And the second she said it, I woke up. Instantly, like the dream cut off mid-sentence, and suddenly I was in my bed with my eyes open and my chest caving in. And I started sobbing. Not like a quiet tear situation. I mean sobbing. That kind where your face hurts and your breathing gets messy, and you can't stop it even if you want to. Even telling my family about it, I couldn't get through the story without breaking. It felt profound and confusing and too big for what it should have been. I couldn't even label the emotion. Was I sad? Was I relieved? Was I comforted? Was I grieving something I never properly let myself grieve? I didn't know. I just knew it overwhelmed me. And the strangest part is, I've had lucid dreams before. Not often, but a few. Usually in nightmares, where I suddenly realize, okay, this isn't real. How do I wake up before the bad thing happens? So it's not like lucidity itself was new to me. But this was different. This didn't feel like escaping a nightmare. It felt like being given something. Like a brief, impossible moment of connection that left a bruise behind. Not in a bad way, just tender, like someone pressed a thumb into an old spot in my heart and reminded me it was still there. And I still don't know what it was. Maybe it was just my brain doing what brains do. Maybe it was grief finally catching up to me years late. Maybe it was nothing at all. But it stuck with me. The way she looked down, the soft laugh, the calm certainty in her voice. I am real. And every time I remember it, a part of me still goes quiet and thinks, what was that? So, when I was about 6, my family moved into my mom's childhood house, the one she always talked about like it had its own personality. My grandparents didn't live there anymore, and for a while, it had just been rented out, kind of waiting for someone to come home to it again. It was a tiny place, 1 floor. The original part of the house was basically one long room. Like, if you took 3 big steps across, you were already at the other wall. And if you walked straight through it, it was maybe 10 long steps end to end. Later, because we were a family of 5, they added 2 small bedrooms onto the right side. So that long original room became our living room and kitchen all together, all in one stretch. One of the bedrooms, the first one, had this window that was maybe waist to chest high. And because the house was so small, you could see that window even from the living room. From there, you could look right into the backyard. And right in front of that window, there was a bed. Now, my grandma, Lola Mira, she always said she could see things. Like, she didn't call it spooky. She talked about it like it was just another sense, like hearing or taste. When she babysat us, she'd tell stories in this calm, matter-of-fact way that made it feel less like a ghost story and more like a warning you should respect. We had 2 big mango trees in the backyard, and one of them stood really close to that bedroom window. Lola Mira would point out toward it and tell us, "Someone lives there. He's kind. That's his home. He watches the yard. And in exchange for staying there, he also protects this house. So don't bother him." And look, our parents would roll their eyes and tell us not to listen, that it was just Grandma being dramatic or imagining things. But me and my sister, we believed her. Not even because we wanted to, more like it felt true. My sister and I shared a room, and sometimes when we were alone, we'd hear this faint little psst, like someone trying to get our attention without wanting to be seen. Once, my sister was messing with me, knocking on our door over and over to scare me into opening it. She stopped suddenly, and when I asked why, she just stared at me and went, "I knocked." And something knocked back. The way she said it wasn't playful anymore. It was flat, like she'd gone cold. About a year after we moved in, I was around 7, and there was a blackout one night. No lights, no fan, that sticky kind of dark where even the air feels heavier. So the whole family decided to sleep in the living room together. We pushed the table and chairs to one side, laid couch cushions on the floor, and tried to make it feel like a fun little campout. It was cramped, and because I was the smallest, they put me on the floor closest to the door of that first bedroom, the one with the window and the bed. All our pillows were on that bed, and my mom said, "Go grab them." So I did. First trip, I picked up 2 pillows at a time and carried them out. No big deal. But when I walked back in for the second trip, I don't know how else to explain it. My stomach just dropped. Like the room had turned its attention toward me. Like I'd stepped into someone else's space without permission. And because that window was right there, I couldn't help looking at it. Outside was pitch black. No backyard lights, no street glow, nothing. Just a flat wall of night. Then I felt it again. That pressure, like someone was staring so hard it had weight. I looked up, and the window was high, high enough that if someone's head was up there, they'd have to be, I don't know, at least 7 feet tall, maybe taller. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just stared, wide-eyed, like it had been there a long time and had no reason to hide. And then I noticed the hands. Fingers curled over the edge of the window frame, like it was holding itself there, steady, patient. My whole body locked up. I couldn't even breathe right. I whispered, "There's someone there." And I grabbed my sister's arm and pointed so hard my finger hurt. She looked at the window, then looked back at me like I was being weird. "Where?" she said. "There's nobody. Hurry up, just get the pillows." And I swear to you, I blinked like a person waking up from a nightmare, and it was still there. So I didn't argue. I just grabbed the pillows as fast as I could without dropping them and walked back out like my legs were made of rubber. Even later, when I was lying down in the living room, facing toward that bedroom door, I could still see it through the window's shape in my memory, like the image had burned into my brain. But the strangest part is, deep down, I didn't feel like it was evil. Scary, yes, terrifying, but not cruel. Because years later, a huge storm came through and knocked down those mango trees. One of them was old and massive, and it leaned toward our house so much that everyone was sure it was going to smash the roof if it fell. But that night, when it finally toppled, there was no crash that woke us. No cracking wood, no shaking walls, nothing. We slept. And in the morning, we found the tree down, resting against the stone fence away from the house, like it had been guided, placed there gently instead of thrown by the wind. And I remember standing there thinking, maybe Lola Mira was right the whole time. Maybe something really did live in that tree, and maybe it wasn't there to hurt us. Maybe it was there to keep the house safe, quietly, faithfully, like a watcher that didn't ask for thanks, only respect. So, let me tell you about this night on Cape Cod that still sticks to me like salt on skin. I was a kid, early teens maybe, and I stayed over at my buddy Eli's family place. I lived on the Cape back then too, but this house was in a different town, tucked right on the water near Buzzards Bay. It was one of those genuinely old coastal mansions, weathered shingles, long history, the kind of place that feels like it remembers every person who ever walked through it. I think it dated back to the 1700s, or at least it felt that old. And the vibe was strong. Like, imagine a house that makes you want to whisper automatically, even when nobody's asleep. Everything had that heavy, antique presence. Old fixtures, thick wooden floors, furniture that looked too serious to sit on, and paintings everywhere. Mostly portraits. People in old-fashioned clothes with these strange proportions, faces tilted the wrong way, shoulders sitting just a little too high, like the artist had been trying to paint humans from memory after hearing them described secondhand. That night, Eli and I were being reckless in that dumb, teenage way where you feel invincible but also curious about anything forbidden. We got into some pills, nothing dramatic in the moment, just enough to make everything feel syrupy and distant. And we'd also snagged a bottle of wine we absolutely did not deserve. So by the time we were stumbling upstairs, I was foggy, tired, and kind of floating. The top floor had this long hallway, like long. 10 bedrooms, maybe more, door after door after door. And here's the weird part. The farther you went down the hall, the stranger it felt. Could have been the haze, could have been my imagination, but I remember the air changing, like it got cooler, heavier, quieter. I was wiped out and ready to crash anywhere, but Eli insisted that I take the room at the very end. He actually walked me down there like it mattered, like he was delivering me to a destination. "You're in this one," he said, all casual, with that little smirk kids get when they know something you don't. The room had this green satin wallpaper with a dark red pattern, almost like little ornaments or curling vines. Old, glossy, kind of fancy in a way that made my skin prickle. There was an ancient-looking queen bed in the center, but the sheets were clean, like the house got rented out sometimes, or at least they kept it guest-ready. And at the head of the bed were two massive portraits, floor-length, bigger than a real person. One showed an older woman sewing, head slightly bowed. The other was a woman brushing her hair, back turned. The colors were bold, almost cubist, almost storybook. Pretty, technically, but unsettling. Mostly because from the bed, it looked like you were lying beneath them while they hovered above you, doing their quiet little tasks forever. I crashed almost immediately, fully clothed on top of the covers, just out. And then I woke up just as fast. Pitch dark inside, but outside it was a bright night, moonlight and stars. One big window cast this pale rectangle on the floor. Everything else was shadow. For a second I had that awful feeling of waking up somewhere unfamiliar and not remembering why you're there. That disoriented, hollow drop in the stomach. I sat up, trying to get my bearings, thinking, where's the bathroom? Which door even leads out? And that's when I saw something move in the corner of my eye. I turned my head, and I swear to you, I saw fabric. Not like a curtain shifting, not like a trick of light. It looked like a ribbon, gold and green, unfurling slowly from the wall. Alive in a way that didn't feel metaphorical. The women in the paintings were moving. Not a blur, not my eyes playing games. Moving like animation. Like their arms and shoulders and hair had motion to them. Like the brush strokes had become muscles. Their ornate clothing, these rich, old-world robes, was flowing, and the fabric was extending beyond the frames like it had weight and air in it. Like it was spilling into the room. Their eyes looked wild, locked onto something. Maybe me. Maybe the room itself. Their mouths were moving too, fast and excited, like they were talking over each other. But there was no sound. None. Just the sight of it. And the strangest part? I couldn't look away. I felt like if I broke eye contact, if I turned my head even a little, something bad would happen. Not like a jump scare, more like I would miss the moment I was supposed to understand. Like they wanted me to witness it, and it would be a mistake to refuse. So I stayed there, sitting up in bed, frozen, staring at these two enormous, moving women, while the moonlight made a rectangle on the floor. I remember the hair on my arms standing straight up. I remember my throat feeling tight, like I couldn't swallow. Eventually, somehow, I drifted back to sleep. Not because I felt safe, but because my body just shut down, like it couldn't hold that kind of fear any longer. In the morning, I told Eli everything. I tried to play it cool, but I'm sure I looked pale as paper. And Eli didn't freak out. He didn't laugh. He didn't even look surprised. He just gave me this small, knowing smile and said, like it was the most normal thing in the world, "Yeah, there are spirits in this house. And listen, I'm not even here to claim I know what it was. I was tired. I was messed up. I was in a strange room in an old mansion full of unsettling portraits. I fully understand how a brain can stitch together something vivid when it's in a bad state. But I also know what I saw. And I know how it felt. Like that house had been waiting a long time for someone to wake up in that room and look up at those paintings in the dark. So let me set this up the way it really felt. Back then, my best friend Jace and I, sometimes my sister too, had this spot we treated like our own little lookout. It was up on a hill in this trailer park, where you could see a basketball court down below, and the whole place was quiet in that late-night way where even the air feels thin. Right by us was the entrance to a water treatment facility. Nothing fancy, just this heavy concrete hatch, like a big square slab, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet. 2 metal exhaust pipes stuck up out of it, about waist high, and they were weirdly perfect for sitting on. We'd perch there for hours and talk about everything and nothing, night after night, like that spot was the only place in the world that made sense. Anyway, this one night, more like early morning, it's around 2 or 3. The kind of time where you're tired but also wired, you know? We'd been messing around with stuff we definitely shouldn't have been doing. Nothing I'm proud of, but that's where we were in life. And there was this thing on the radio about an escaped convict somewhere nearby. I remember that part so clearly, because the whole night already had this uneasy charge to it. Then we start seeing helicopters sweeping over the fields in the distance, those big, slow loops, like they were combing the dark. The lights would skim across patches of ground and disappear again. So we're sitting there watching all that, kind of talking in half sentences, and I just happened to look over, down toward this small playground wedged between 2 trailers. Just a little set of swings and one of those plastic slides. Barely anything. And that's when I see it. At first, my brain tries to make it normal. It looks like, I don't know, like a pale animal. For a split second, I think, a cat? Something small and white moving around. But then it changes. Not shape exactly. More like it closes the distance so fast that my brain can't keep up with how wrong it is. It's coming toward me, straight toward me, and it's big. Bigger than it should be if it was what I first thought. And the way it moved. God, the way it moved wasn't like a blurry trick of light. It wasn't like, oh, I must have imagined that. It was too clear, too intentional. I watched it launch. I watched this white thing leap at me. And I swear to you, I have been through real pain in my life. Burns, cuts, fights, heartbreak, all of it. But I have never screamed like I screamed in that moment. It was like my whole body gave up. Like something deep inside me just folded and said, "This is it, you're done." 1 second it's flying at me, and the next, it's gone. Just gone. Like it evaporated. Like it had never been there at all. And I'm sitting on that pipe, shaking so hard my teeth are rattling. I'm trying to breathe, but I'm doing that ugly gasping thing, like I can't get enough air. My hands feel numb. Everything in me is trembling. Jace is staring at me like he's never seen me before. His eyes are huge. He doesn't even know what to ask first. And all I can manage to say is, "You need to go home, right now. I need to get inside." And then, because it felt important, because I needed at least one thing to be solid, I told him, "I'm not guessing. I'm not exaggerating. I saw it. Whatever that was, I saw it." But here's the problem. It doesn't feel like a dream. It doesn't feel like a fuzzy memory. It feels like a clean, sharp moment that got stamped into me. Long and lucid. Too real to shrug off. So I started looking into it. Paranormal stuff, weird encounters, anything that could match what I experienced. And honestly, I don't have an answer. I'm still stuck with this thing where part of me wants to explain it away, and the other part of me, the part that remembers the exact way my body reacted, knows I didn't just make it up. And I hate that I can't name it. I hate that I can't file it under anything familiar. All I know is, that night on the hill, with the helicopters circling and the playground sitting quiet between the trailers. Something white ran at me like it meant it, and then it disappeared like it never existed at all. All right, let me tell you about the one room in our hotel that I genuinely wish I'd never numbered. It's room 208. Second floor, nothing special on paper. Same layout as the others, same bed, same TV, same everything. But if you've ever had a place in your life that just felt off the second you stepped near it, that's 208. So, quick background. My name's Darren. My wife, Mara, and I buy struggling businesses, clean them up, get them running right, and usually sell them after a few years. We've flipped restaurants, little shops, the usual chaos. Mara's the kind of person who gets bored if she isn't fixing something. So one day she goes, "Let's buy a hotel." And I'm thinking, sure, how bad could it be? We bought this hotel in a smaller town, maybe 50-something thousand people, on the rougher end of town. We kept some staff, let some go, and we decided we'd run shifts ourselves at first. Mara took mornings, I took nights. We installed cameras, updated rooms, patched drywall, repainted. I even went out and bought a ridiculous pile of flat screens, like I was stocking an electronics store. We also allow pets, which, let me tell you, prints money. Most hotels around us don't, so we stay busy. And that's where room 208 first showed its teeth. One night, this guy checks in with 3 dogs. We usually cap it at 2, but he seemed fine, so I took a big deposit and let it slide. I watched him on camera. Normal enough. He goes into 208, shuts the door. Everything quiet. Then around 2 a.m., those dogs start barking like the room is on fire. Not normal barking. Not someone walked by barking. I mean full-blown, panic, desperate we need out barking. I get 3, 4 calls from other guests complaining. I go upstairs and knock. "Front desk. Sir, you need to quiet the dogs." Nothing. I call the room. Over and over. No answer. So I grab my master key card and go back up, and the dogs are losing it even harder. Scratching, whining, barking, throwing themselves at the door like something in there is trying to kill them. I knock again, crack the door open a little, and I'm yelling into the room like, "Sir, if you don't answer, I'm calling the police." Still nothing. Just the TV blaring and those dogs in full terror mode. Police show up. We crack the door, and the dogs instantly rush it. The officers won't fully open it because they don't want 3 terrified dogs launching at them, which, fair. So they tell me, "We'll wait for animal control in the morning." Apparently, animal control in this town clocks in at 8 a.m. sharp, like the dogs scheduled their emergency. So at 8, animal control arrives. Police come back. They open the door and, listen, those dogs explode out of that room like a damn cartoon. They sprint down the hall, slam through the stairwell, blast across the lobby, and bolt right out the front doors. I have never seen animals behave like that in my life. It was pure survival instinct, like they were getting away from a predator. We go into 208. No person, no guy, no owner, nobody. Animal control takes the dogs. The guy never comes back. We call him, charge his card for the damage, and later it turns into a whole court mess because the room was, I'll just say it was horrific. Bodily fluids, destruction, the kind of mess that takes days and makes grown adults gag. Here's the part that started the pattern. When we were still cleaning the room, fans running, window cracked, no bedding, mattress half moved, one of our newer desk staff accidentally rented out 208 to a guest. And I'm like, "Why would you give them that room?" She goes, "The computer said it was clean." I'm talking, no matter what I do, the software insists 208 is clean and ready, like it's arguing with me. I call the software company. They can't figure it out either. And then we notice something even creepier. The system will not let us successfully mark 208 as occupied unless someone is actually in there. It's like the room only accepts certain people. We finally finish repairs, put a guest in there. 3 hours later, he calls down and asks to switch rooms. I say, "What's wrong?" He pauses and goes, "Nothing's wrong. It just feels weird." That's it. That's all he'll say. And then it keeps happening. Over the next month, we get complaint after complaint from 208. People don't always say haunted or ghost. It's always the same vague language. It feels wrong. It feels heavy. It feels like someone's there. And pets? Pets are the worst. Anytime we tried to place animals in 208, they'd freak out, whining, refusing to enter, yanking on leashes, some barking at the closet door like they saw something move. Now, here's where it gets truly bizarre. A woman checks in one night. This was a few days before I finally gave up on the room for good. The system, of course, offers up 208 like it's proud of itself. She takes it, signs the paperwork, goes upstairs. When I come in for my night shift, she's not in her room. She's sitting in the lobby, on our couch, just staring. From about 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., she doesn't move much. So I go over and I'm polite, because that's my job. "Ma'am, is everything okay? Is the room not comfortable? Too cold? Too hot?" I even crack a joke about the mattress being expensive, like, "Please, enjoy it. I paid enough for it." She looks at me and says, real calm, "It's too loud in there." And I'm like, "Too loud? Is someone else in the room?" She says, "No." So I ask her name. She gives me one. I check the reservation and it's under a different name. Now I'm confused, so I ask if she knows the name on the room. She goes, "Yes," and says it, correctly. And then she admits she used a friend's ID to check in, which is a huge no-no, like major. So I call 208. No answer. I go up, open the door with my master key. No one inside. I come back and tell her, "Ma'am, you can't just sit in the lobby all night. Do you even have a key?" She says no. Then she pulls out a cigarette and starts walking toward the front doors, and I follow her like, "Ma'am, I'm trying to help you. What is going on?" And she suddenly whips around, throws the room card at me and screams, "I'm not the one!" Just like that. I'm standing there holding a room key thinking, "Not the one? What?" She storms off. Cameras show her leaving the lot. 20 minutes later, she comes back, walks in like nothing happened, sits in the exact same spot on the couch. I tell her she can't stay here. She looks up and screams again, "I'm not the one!" I'm not proud of it, but in my head I'm like, okay, something is seriously wrong with this woman. Then she yells, "Leave me alone or I'm calling the police. I'm not the one." So I call the police myself. They show up, ask her basic questions. She doesn't know what day it is, doesn't know where she is. They say she lives nearby and they drive her home. But then I do the camera review because now I'm fully locked in. And sure enough, a man did check in under that room. I see her go up with him. They're in there about 10 minutes. She comes back out alone. And the man? He never comes out. Ever. I watch footage for days. No hallway exit. No stairwell. No lobby. Nothing. It makes no sense. So I charge the card on file because I have the ID, I have the footage, I have the paperwork. That guy shows up furious, yelling at my front desk. "I'm not the one! I'm not the one! We dispute it with the credit card company. We win. Then he takes us to small claims court. And I swear to you, hand on my life, he stands in front of the judge and starts yelling again. I'm not the one! I'm not the one! And the judge is looking at him like, Sir, what are you talking about? And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, this can't be coincidence anymore. Because at that point, we've had, no exaggeration, 10, maybe 20 issues tied to that room. People in 208 either panic, get irrational, or start acting like someone's accusing them of something they didn't do. Always the same words. So we finally shut it down, turned it into storage, told staff, no one goes in there alone. I'm not even kidding. People refused to clean it. Funny thing is, even after we closed it, the system still tried to offer it up sometimes as clean and ready, like it was waiting. And because I'm a business owner, and yes, I'm greedy, I eventually reopened it. Just temporarily. Big group came in. Girls' softball team wanted basically the whole second floor. We cleared out storage, cleaned 208 twice, sprayed it, aired it out, everything perfect. 4 high school girls stayed in 208. I waited an hour after check-in. Everything seemed fine. I went to lie down. Then the police station calls us and says, someone from your hotel dialed 911, whispered, and hung up. I check our phone system logs. Room 208. I call the girls. Hey, you cannot call 911 from the room phones. They swear they didn't. An hour later, it happens again. Police call. Same story. I go up. Knock. The girls are clearly asleep. Like, dead asleep. Their coach comes out furious, thinking they're prank calling. So we remove the phone from the room. Problem solved, right? At 3 a.m., every phone in our office lights up. Red alert, 911. All of them. Front desk phones, office phone, main switch, everything screaming that 208 dialed emergency. But there is no phone in 208 anymore. I hard reset the system until it finally shuts up. Then at 5 a.m., we're starting breakfast early because it's a packed house and teens eat like wolves. Fire alarm goes off. Level 1, the mild kind. Usually smoke from cooking. We check. No smoke. 10 minutes later, another level 1. I check the panel. Room 208. Again, no smoke. No smell. Our smoke detection device shows negative. Nothing. They check out. Room gets cleaned. No issues. Next night, the room is empty. Then we get an alarm. Low water pressure. I'm like, what does that even mean? I go to 208, open the door, and the sprinkler system is blasting water through the room, soaking the carpet, spraying the TV, soaking the coffee maker, everything. Like it picked the one moment nobody was inside and decided to flood itself. We shut it down, vacuum water, close the room again. And I'm telling you all this because even after everything, after rewiring, after ripping up parts of the floor, after fumigating, after turning it into storage, after swearing it off, it doesn't stop. Over the last year, guests started reporting shadows. Not just, I thought I saw something. Specific stuff. Someone standing over them. Movement in the mirror behind them. A tall, dark figure in the reflection. Staff started saying it too. Our housekeeper, she's been doing this forever. Nothing scares her. She props the door open to 208, refuses to close it behind her, and rushes like she's trying to outrun something. And the closet. I hate that closet. People report missing clothes, missing bags. One woman swore her suitcase was in the closet and it vanished. We searched everywhere. Nothing. A week later, her suitcase is suddenly sitting in our lost and found by the lobby. But there's no light, no wiring, nothing installed. It's just a plain, empty closet with a sliding door. Even the travel nurses, people who don't mess around, logical, practical, refused to stay in 208. One of them came down in the middle of the night looking like she'd seen death and said, "I don't care if you put me in a supply room, I am not sleeping in that room." She wouldn't even go back upstairs for her bags. We had to send staff to get them. And lately, it's spreading. People have started reporting shadows not just inside 208, but in the hallway outside it. Guests say they see someone standing there late at night, and when they look again, it's gone. Then last night, this is the part that finally made me sit down and talk about it. I was locking up my office, and I hear 3 loud knocks on my door. I check the cameras. No one. I open the door anyway. Hallway's empty, but out of the corner of my eye, I see something move. A dark shape, just a smear of something, slipping down the corridor toward 208 like it belonged there. And I just stood there, holding the door open, feeling my stomach sink. Because at this point, I don't know what it is. Haunted, electrical, mental health coincidences, a cursed room, a gas leak, a pattern my brain wants to connect. I've tried everything. All I know is room 208 doesn't act like a room. It acts like it's waiting, and every time we let someone stay there, sooner or later, somebody ends up staring at me like they don't recognize where they are and screaming, "I'm not the one." Hey, I wanted to tell you something that's been sitting on my heart since it happened. My cat, his name was Milo, passed away not too long ago. It's been a little over 2 weeks now. I got his ashes back about a week ago, and even though we knew he was getting worse, the way everything unfolded still hit like a surprise. We ended up having to let him go with euthanasia, and I'm not going to lie, that part was brutal. But I keep coming back to one thing that gives me peace. I got to hold him for a long time through the whole process. I got to stay close, whisper to him, and really say goodbye. I'd had Milo for most of my life. We were actually joking that we were about to celebrate him hitting his legal age in human years, like it was going to be this silly little milestone moment. And then, he didn't make it there. That still stings. If you've ever had one of those animals who's basically a whole person in a fur coat, you'll get what I mean when I say he had a huge personality. He was loud, chatty, dramatic. The kind of cat who didn't just exist in a room, he announced himself. Honestly, if you stuffed the soul of a big, goofy dog into a cat's body, that was him. Anyway, this happened just this past weekend, and it was so intense that I still get chills thinking about it. I had family over, and my mom spent the night. And my mom, she's important in this story because besides me, she was the only other person who really took care of Milo. When I went away for college, she was the one feeding him, talking to him, rolling her eyes at his attitude. She knew him almost as well as I did. Like, she knew his moods, his routines, his exact voice. So early in the morning, still dark, I woke up to this long, loud meow coming from the hallway. And when I say loud, I mean it wasn't like a faint little, maybe I imagined it sound. It was one of those meows that has presence. It kept going, too. It didn't stop just because I woke up. And instantly, my whole body just went, "That's him." It wasn't just a cat sound. It was his tone, his specific way of calling out, like he was making sure you heard him. And at the same time, I had this strong feeling my mom wasn't in the bedroom anymore. I couldn't see well. My eyesight is awful, and I didn't have my glasses on. But I could just sense she'd gotten up. And what's weird is, I wasn't scared. I didn't even feel confused, really. I felt this warm, calm contentment, like my heart recognized him before my brain could start arguing. I remember thinking very clearly, that's Milo. He's here. And then I just let myself relax and go back to sleep. Later that morning, my mom comes up to me and pulls me aside, and she looks nervous, like she's trying to figure out how to say something without upsetting me. And she goes, I don't know how to tell you this, but I heard him. She said she woke up thirsty and got up to go to the kitchen, the one by the living room. Everyone else was asleep. The apartment was quiet, still dark. No TV, no talking, nothing. And the second she stepped into the kitchen, she heard a long meow. So loud she literally froze, like her body stopped before her mind even caught up, because it sounded like he was right there in the room with her. And she said, I knew it was him. I knew that meow. The second she said that, I got this rush through my chest and I told her, Mom, I heard him too, from the back bedroom, same time. And the strangest part? No one else heard it, just me and her. We kept saying maybe it made sense because we were the ones who mothered him. We were the ones trained by years of hearing that voice every day. Like maybe love tunes your ears in a certain way. And then it clicked even more. Because the kitchen, that's where his bowls were. And honestly, they still are. After he passed, I made a little space for him, like an ofrenda. Just something gentle and loving. I leave fresh water there and a bit of kibble, and I change it out. Not because I think he needs it in a literal way, but because it's my way of still caring for him. My way of saying, you still belong here. And it hit me. Of course it was the kitchen. And of course it was that time. Because before he got sick, this was his thing. If you woke up around 4 or 5 in the morning to get water, or you went anywhere near the fridge, he'd start up immediately. This long, dramatic, I'm starving, I'm dying, no one has ever fed me in my entire life, meow. Every single time. Like clockwork. So when we realized the meow happened right there, right then, it was almost funny. In this soft, aching way. Like he was still himself. And for me, that's what made it comforting. Not scary, not spooky, just familiar. Like he was saying, hey, I'm okay. And also, where's breakfast? So yeah, apparently my boy is still a little foodie on the other side, still meowing like he's ready to eat the entire kitchen. And honestly, that's perfectly okay with me. I'll keep his bowls filled here, just in case he still likes to check in. Okay, so I need to tell you something that's been sitting heavy in my chest, because I genuinely don't know if I'm being dramatic or if I should actually be worried. My husband and I, well, Miles and I, moved into this house a little over a year ago. It felt normal at first. Cute even. The kind of place where you start imagining holidays and kids running down the hallway, you know? And then, about a week after we moved in, I heard this sharp bang right by the front door. Not a little pop, like a real solid knock. I turned my head and my keys, hanging on this little hook rack we keep by the entry, were swinging in a full circle. Not just swaying, like someone had spun them. And the weirdest part? Nothing else on the rack moved. Not the leash, not the spare lanyard, nothing. There wasn't a draft. The air felt totally still. After that, the house started doing this thing where it couldn't just be quiet. A few weeks later, I heard a crash in the kitchen, loud enough that I thought something major fell. I walked in, and one of the vent covers had popped loose and dropped straight out of the wall onto the floor. just sitting there like it had been pushed. And here's the detail that still bugs me. That vent is right above our pantry door, because the pantry door has its own personality, apparently. There are days where I shut it, and it clicks, and I walk away. Then 5 minutes later, it's cracked open again. Sometimes I'll shut it over and over, 6, 7 times, before it finally stays. And I'd blame the latch or the hinge, except it doesn't do it consistently. It comes and goes like it's choosing when to behave. And when I'm home alone, Miles travels for work a lot. I hear things. Footsteps where there shouldn't be footsteps. Little thumps. The kind of noises that make you pause mid-breath and just listen. And I know houses make normal noises. I get that. But this doesn't feel like settling. It feels like I'm not the only one walking around. We have 2 big guard dogs, sweet, but definitely the type who don't miss much. And they'll randomly start barking or whining at absolutely nothing I can see. It's usually at night, usually when the whole house is still, and it's never playful barking. It's that tense, low, something's wrong energy. Sometimes they'll stare at one spot like they're tracking something moving across the room. For the longest time, Miles didn't buy any of it. He'd do the whole, "Babe, it's an old house" thing, or tell me I was freaked out because he was gone so much. But then about a month ago, it happened to him. He was home, I wasn't, and he heard that same bang by the front door. He looked over. His keys were swinging in a full circle, exactly like mine had that first week. And when he told me, the way he sounded, it wasn't joking. It wasn't skeptical. It was quiet, like he didn't want to make it bigger by saying it out loud. And that night, this is the part that made my stomach flip. He woke up and swore he saw a figure in the corner of our bedroom, just standing there. He said it was only for a moment, but it was long enough for his brain to register, that's not a shadow. And he told me the dogs reacted around the same time, like they sensed something before he even sat up. We've also had this other thing with their crates. We're careful about locking them, like really careful, because somehow, every so often, we'll come home and the crates are open or partially unlatched, even though we know we secured them. We even added extra locking clips because it kept happening. And still, it happens. Which brings me to this morning. I know I closed it. I remember it so clearly because I stood there with my hand on the handle, debating if I should go back inside to grab something I forgot, and I didn't want to risk waking the dogs. I literally stood there for like half a minute doing that mental math of, is it worth it? Do I need it? Can it wait? And I decided no. I closed the door and I left. But apparently at some point after that, the front door was just open. When I got home, both crates were partially unlocked again, and one of the locking pieces, the little metal clasp we use, was missing, completely gone. We tore through the usual spots, the floor, under the couch, the crate tray, by the entryway, everything. It's like it evaporated. So now I'm sitting here with this pile of weird that keeps growing, and I don't know what to do with it. Because part of me wants someone to look me in the eye and say, here, this is the normal explanation. This is why vents fall and doors won't latch and keys spin in circles and dogs bark at nothing. But another part of me is, honestly, spooked. The front door being wide open really got to me. That feels different than a noise or a creepy moment in the night. That feels like safety, like boundaries. And I keep thinking, what if we raise a family here someday? What if this isn't just a quirky house? And I hate even saying this because it sounds ridiculous, but do you think I should be worried? Like, actually worried? Not just unsettled. Because I don't even know what I'm asking for. Validation, logic, reassurance, a reality check, anything. I just know I don't like the feeling that something in this house can touch things and open things and leave us guessing. Hey, so this happened a few summers back, and I swear it still clings to me. I was about 13 then, still in middle school, and my house sat right across from the school playground. The school had this huge soccer field too, wide open, no real fence around it, just lights and empty space. It was one of those warm summer nights where the sky doesn't fully feel like night yet. Around 9:30 p.m., my best friend, let's call her Mira, was hanging out with me in the backyard. We were bored in that restless way kids get, and she goes, "Let's go over to the field and run around for a bit." And I know, it sounds harmless. It was harmless. At first. We crossed over like we'd done a million times before. No gates to sneak through, no fence to climb, just grass and that big open field, with a few lampposts glowing in the distance. We started running, laughing, doing stupid sprints like we were training for something important. Mira was having the time of her life. But almost immediately, I got that feeling. You know the one, like your skin knows something your brain hasn't caught up with yet, like you're being watched. I told Mira quietly, "Do you feel that? Like, someone's here?" She rolled her eyes, smiling, and said something like, "You're just spooking yourself. Relax, it's fine." So I tried. I really did. We were out there maybe 10 minutes when I suddenly stopped right in the middle of the field. Mira kept walking, drifting a little farther away, like she was about to loop back around. And that's when I saw it. This shadow, low to the ground at first, moved fast to the left. My friend was walking to the right, nowhere near it. The shape reminded me of a dog, but not in a normal way. It looked wrong. Too big. Its legs seemed too long, like the joints were in places they shouldn't be, like it was trying to be an animal and failing. I stood there, frozen, staring at the spot where it disappeared, waiting for a real explanation to show up, like a stray dog, a person, anything. Nothing did. And that watching feeling got stronger, like the air itself was tightening. A few seconds later, I looked back toward the far edge of the field, and I saw a second shape. This one was taller, a solid black figure sprinting behind one of the lampposts in the distance. It moved fast, but the movement was wrong again. Too smooth, too unnatural, like it wasn't running the way a person runs. The moment I saw it, my voice came out sharper than I meant it to. "Mira, now, we're going home." She turned, confused. "Why? What happened?" "I'll tell you later," I said, and I didn't even wait for her to agree. I just started walking fast, like if I acted calm, maybe whatever it was wouldn't notice we'd noticed. Near the playground there was this little shed, almost like a storage hut, and I stopped there, pretending I needed to tie my shoe, just so I could look back without making it obvious. And I wish I hadn't looked, because it was there. The exact same tall figure stood in the distance, right around the spot where we'd been standing. And it wasn't standing like a normal person. It looked lifted, like it was balancing in a way that made my stomach drop. Then it shifted, almost like it rose higher, and I realized it was upright, staring straight at us. It was tall, like close to 2 meters. Thin, too thin, but it had this presence that made my body scream danger. Then it started running toward us, not walking, not hesitating, just charging. The distance to my house felt impossible, like the street stretched longer than it ever had. We reached the fence by my yard and I risked one glance back. It was across the street, under the dim light, stopped now, just watching us. And I swear to you, it looked like it was smiling. We bolted inside. I slammed the front door shut, locked it, then locked it again like that would make it more real, more safe. Mira and I just stood there, gasping, staring at each other like we were trying to confirm we hadn't both lost our minds. Finally, I asked, "You saw it too, right?" And she nodded. No joke, no hesitation, just, yes. I didn't tell my family. I couldn't. I already knew what they'd say, that I was tired, that it was dark, that I imagined it. But I know what I felt, and I know what I saw. After that, I went down this rabbit hole online, trying to find anything that matched it. And I ended up reading about these things people describe in whispers, like you're not supposed to say the name out loud. Skinwalkers, mimics, whatever you want to call them. I don't know exactly what it was, but I know it wasn't normal. And even now, years later, I still think about that night way more often than I want to. Sometimes I'll look out toward the field and feel my stomach twist, like my body remembers before my mind does. So yeah, that's what happened. And if you've ever had something like that happen to you, if you've ever seen something that didn't make sense but felt real, I'd honestly like to hear it. Because part of me still wonders if it's out there, or if it was ever really gone. So, my friend Maddie stayed over the other night, mostly because it had been forever since we'd really hung out, and she'd just gotten back from this weekend trip to the Stanley Hotel. She was buzzing about it, in that wide-eyed, you wouldn't believe what I felt in that place kind of way. Maddie's always been the intuitive one. Like, she's the type who can walk into a room and immediately clock the energy, the mood, the presence of something. Me? I'm aware, but not like that. I've always felt things in the background, like a subtle shift or that weird sensation of being watched, but I've never actually seen anything. Not clearly. Still, lately I've been thinking about trying to get more in tune with it all, even though, honestly, I haven't done much besides one thing. I've always felt like I have this gentle, protective spirit around me. I started calling her Eliza a while back, just because the name felt right. It sounds silly when I say it out loud, but she's always felt kind, grounding, like a presence that doesn't want anything from me except to keep me safe. Anyway, after dinner, we got settled in my room, talking for a bit, and eventually the conversation faded out like it always does when you're tired. Lights off, quiet. That soft, half-asleep feeling creeping in. And then, it happened. I was drifting, right on the edge of sleep, when suddenly this image snapped into my mind so sharply, it didn't feel like a normal dream. It was a man, but wrong. He was upside down against this deep crimson-red background, with this sickly grayish skin and these bright, almost glowing white eyes. No expression, just staring. I swear my whole body jolted. I sat straight up, heart pounding like I'd been startled awake from a nightmare. Except it didn't feel like a nightmare. It felt like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. Maddie immediately sat up too. "What?" she asked, already worried, like she could tell something had shifted. And I tried to play it off. I told her, "It's probably nothing. I've had weird, almost dream things before." But even as I said it, I could feel how thin that sounded. My skin was buzzing. The air felt heavy. So we turned on the TV, not even to watch it, just for noise and light. We scooted a little closer together, that instinctive don't leave space between us feeling. And then I started scanning my room, just looking. Not because I wanted to find something, but because my body was acting like it already knew something was there. That's when I saw it. In the corner near my door, there was this tall, fuzzy, human-shaped figure, pale, almost whitish, like it wasn't fully solid. Not a person, but shaped like one. And it was just standing there. I froze so hard I swear I forgot how to breathe for a second. And I turned slowly to Maddie and I said, as calmly as I could, trying to sound like I wasn't about to fall apart, "Okay, I might be paranoid. I might be imagining it. But is there something standing in that corner?" The way her face changed, like instant terror, told me everything before she even spoke. She whispered, "Yes." And that was the moment where I think my stomach dropped through the floor, because it wasn't just me. We weren't feeding off each other's fear. We were seeing the same thing. Maddie admitted she'd noticed it earlier, but she was trying to ignore it, like sometimes you do when you don't want to invite attention. But once I said it out loud, it was like the room acknowledged that we acknowledged it. We both knew we couldn't just pretend anymore. I grabbed my Bible from my bookshelf because I didn't know what else to grab. It felt like protection, like an anchor, like something that couldn't be twisted. We started asking questions, carefully, slowly. Maddie was trying to feel it out, and I was holding the Bible like it was the only solid thing in the room. And the answers were wrong. Dark. Not like a clear voice, not like a movie demon speaking English, but more like impressions, messages, a pressure that pushed meaning into your mind. It kept circling the same ideas: evil, danger, she shouldn't be here, like it wanted Maddie out, like it was targeting her. And then, everything shifted again, because I felt Eliza. It's hard to explain, but it was like warmth moving through static, like a familiar presence stepping between us and whatever that thing was. Maddie's eyes got wide, and she swallowed hard, like she was hearing something she didn't want to hear. And she started saying phrases out loud, like they were being handed to her in pieces. "The man. He's here. Corner. Get him away." I swear to you, it was the most terrified I've ever been while still being fully awake. So I started reading scripture, not because I knew the right verses, but because I needed my voice to do something besides shake. I needed to fill the space with something stronger than fear. Maddie stayed focused, like she was trying to push Eliza forward, asking for protection, asking for it to leave. And then, this part still gives me chills. Even the air changed. We both got this wave of cold, like goosebumps sweeping over our arms at the same time. And then it was like the room exhaled, like pressure lifting, like the corner wasn't crowded anymore. We looked, and it was gone. No fuzzy figure, no standing shape, nothing. We both just sat there for a second, kind of stunned, like we didn't know what to do next because our bodies were still in survival mode, but the threat wasn't visible anymore. I whispered "thank you" out loud to Eliza. Maddie did too. And I moved the Bible from the bookshelf and set it right next to the bed, like I didn't want it far away for even a second. We did eventually fall asleep, but it wasn't restful. We both woke up multiple times throughout the night, like that lingering adrenaline wouldn't let us fully drop. But the thing never came back. At least, we never felt it again. Never saw it again. And I'm still spooked. I really am. Because it's not the first weird thing that's happened around me, but it's the first time I've ever actually seen anything. Even if I couldn't see the details like Maddie can, I saw enough. And now I keep wondering, did something open up in me? Is that going to happen again? Was it a one-time thing because Maddie brought that energy back with her from the hotel? Or because I've been thinking more about being receptive? I don't know. All I know is that it scared me, and I don't feel like I have a clear next step besides trying to stay grounded and not spiral. But yeah, that's what happened. And honestly, Even saying it out loud still makes my skin prickle. Okay, so we've kind of made peace with the fact that we have a roommate who contributes absolutely nothing to rent. Like, zero. And honestly, most days it's just little audio or visual things. Nothing that makes us feel unsafe. More like, really? Again? Energy? The woman who lived here before us, her name was Marilyn, I think. She passed away in the hospital from cancer. And I know how this sounds, but I swear she never fully left. Every now and then, I'll be in the kitchen and I'll feel someone brush my back. Or, how do I say this without making it weird? Sometimes it's a very clear, very unmistakable touch on my backside. So I told my partner, Evan, and of course he laughed. He's not the type who goes looking for paranormal stuff, but let's just say he's seen enough here that he doesn't roll his eyes the way he used to. One night, garbage night, we're clearing out the fridge, tossing old leftovers, the whole glamorous routine. Evan suddenly stops and goes, totally serious, "Did you just touch my butt?" And I froze, because both of my hands were wrapped around this huge mixing bowl. I just stared at him and went, "I'm holding a bowl with both hands." Then I added, because I couldn't help myself, "Also, your butt is literally out of my reach right now." And I started laughing. He didn't laugh. He just stood there looking genuinely confused, like something in his brain had finally clicked into place. I honestly think that was the moment he fully accepted. Okay, fine. We live with a ghost. But then the squash thing happened. Evan usually gets home from work before I do. One afternoon, he was feeding our cat, and when he finished, he put these 2 squash we'd bought back where we always kept them, on top of the fridge. He turns to walk away, and then he hears this loud thunk from the dining room. Now, our dining room is connected to the kitchen, like open layout. And the weird part is where the squash landed, because if a squash falls off the fridge, you'd expect it to drop, right by the fridge. This one didn't. It landed several feet away, like it had been tossed. Not rolled, not bounced, not slid, just lobbed. Evan said he stood there for a second doing that silent math people do when they're trying to prove to themselves they're not losing it. When he told me later, I laughed and said, "Maybe our ghost just hates squash." We joked about it for like a week. Then, maybe a couple weeks later, we had squash again, because apparently we don't learn. I was planning dinner and I couldn't find one of them. I checked the counters, the pantry, the fridge, the little rolling cart, even places that made no sense because I was starting to feel mildly insane. Eventually, I gave up and just cooked something else. The next morning, I opened the freezer door to grab meat, and there it was. The missing squash was wedged into the freezer door. And not just sitting there, wedged, like shoved in with purpose. I had to yank at it to get it out. I just stood there holding this icy squash, staring like, what am I even looking at right now? So I called out to my son like, "Okay, be honest, did you do this as a joke?" And he was so sincerely confused he almost looked offended. He swore he hadn't touched it. And because I needed to know I wasn't losing my mind, I tried to recreate it. I took the other squash, the one that hadn't been frozen and was a little smaller, and I tried every angle, every height, every "maybe it bounced just right" scenario. I could not get it to lodge behind that bar in the freezer door. It kept bouncing out and dropping down. Even forcing it in took effort. Here's the funniest part. A friend of mine who's, let's call her sensitive, had been over months earlier to play Catan with us. And way before any of this squash nonsense, she casually mentioned, "Oh, there's a woman in your kitchen," like she was commenting on the weather. So now we call her our kitchen ghost. And our working theory, our deeply scientific, carefully researched theory, is that she simply does not like squash. And I'm not even kidding. When we buy squash now, I'll set them down and say out loud, in the most polite voice, "All right, Marilyn, please leave these alone. Because listen, if you're going to haunt my kitchen, fine, but stop messing with my groceries.